right, everyone, welcome to the Reality Check. We are at the top of the Reality Check week. It is the Monday edition of Reality Check, your daily dose of public affairs, of politics, and public policy here on the home of Black Talk Media. It's none other than WURD, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, and Word app. Where there is a word, there is indeed an app for that. Welcome to the program. Welcome to the Monday edition, the top of the week edition of Reality Check. I am your host, executive producer, also creator of Reality Check, Charles Ellison. You can reach me on Twitter.com if you can. I will get to you there. That's a great way to engage me on Twitter.com. I am at Ellison Report. Tag me at Ellison Report. Definitely, you will not find me on Facebook. So you definitely won't find any Facebook ads for me on Facebook. There's a big controversy with Facebook ads. We might have that conversation a little bit later on this week too. But you can find me at Ellison Report on Twitter.com. Also, hashtag reality check. Let's populate hashtag reality check as well. At the top of this Monday edition, the phone lines are open. The phone lines are open at 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. We have a busy Monday edition that has been put together for you. So the latest intelligence on all the events and news that are happening. So we just try to have a much more deep dive, textured, investigative conversation on the news of the day. We do that here on Reality Check. So a little bit later on, we'll be having Pressing Matters National. We've got political science professor Andre Gillespie and also Peter Groff, our regular contributors for Pressing Matters National. They're coming back. They'll be here with us a little bit later on in the 10 o'clock hour. In the meantime, remember, at the top of the 10 o'clock hour, phone lines are open at 215-634-8065 and also 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Also at the 11 o'clock hour and at around 11 o'clock, we are scheduled to speak with Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. So the city's top prosecutor, Larry Krasner, will be with us at 11 a.m. So you might want to prepare to call him if you have questions for him. I'm sure there are people that have a lot of questions for the district attorney in Philadelphia, particularly with violence being so high in Philly, violence or at least homicides now 24% above, 24% above where they were this time last year. We've had 219 homicides thus far in Philadelphia in 2020. Thus far in 2020, we had 176 homicides at this time last year. So now it's 219, tragically, sadly, and we have not seen this figure, the comparison between years, go below 20% above where it was at this time last year. We have not seen that go below 20% for quite some time now. I'm trying to remember when's the last time we saw that go below 20%. We have not seen it go below 10%. So throughout the entire course of 2020, so far as we're now into the summer, the homicide rate has been steadily higher than what it was at any time last year. It has not, we have not seen one day, and I've looked at this daily. I've made a daily habit out of checking the Philadelphia crime stats, which are provided by the Philadelphia Police Department. I made a daily habit out of this. I've never since the beginning of 2020 seen this go below 10% of the homicide rate. I've never seen the homicide rate go below 10% where it was this time last year. I've never also, in the weekly crime reports, I have not seen a decrease. I've not seen a decrease in overall violent crime. So that includes not just homicides, but also just people getting injured by all sorts of violence, people who have been victimized by violence, and also that includes Philadelphia's rape or sexual assault data as well. And as we were saying last week, and I'm not sure if people are processing that or hearing it, the rate of rape, the rate of sexual assault in the city of Philadelphia is astounding. It is very high. As of the last weekly report, rapes are up 63% over the last 28-day period, 63%. And the weekly report before that, rapes were up by nearly 49%, nearly 50%. So then you already saw between two weekly reports a nearly 14% increase in rapes. So you want to hold your kids, hold your daughters, especially hold them very close. Don't let them go out there by themselves, really. If you live in Philadelphia. And so I don't think that yet people have processed that. They've registered. When I say it, I actually get either people sending me emails or people tweeting, or every now and then we'll get a call where people are, or I see like a Facebook live comment every now and then where people say, what? What did you just say? Like, yes, Philly is now a very, it's become something of a rapist city. And I don't say that with any sort of, in any sort of joking way. Or being facetious there. Philly has become a rapist city. And so that should be something that should concern a lot of folks out there. I'm definitely not allowing my daughters to, I put my daughters on alert, like, don't be taking any trips or going into the city alone. And I just is what it is, right? It's a data point that I saw, and I got immediately defensive and guarded about it. It makes no sense, but that's where it is right now. That's where it stands. We're going to ask the district attorney about that and what's being done about it, because I don't hear any of the elected leaders talking about it. It's as if it doesn't exist. It's as if like no one's reading the Philadelphia Police Weekly Reports. I don't know what's going on there. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Also, want to ask you, because there was the big conversation over the weekend, not just in Philadelphia, not just in southeastern PA, but nationally, should we be reopening schools? Should we be reopening schools? And so it's a very complex conversation, right? Because, if you're a parent and you've been struggling, particularly if you're a working parent and you've been struggling through this this phase of quarantine and stay at home, and now we're reopening the economy, but it's really not all that comfortable to leave your home or to be outside too much because people are still getting sick. Coronavirus cases are spiking in a very dramatic way, and coronavirus deaths as well are actually going up. They're increasing very sharply, the coronavirus deaths. I know that there were some people who were thinking that, the infection rates are going up, but it seems like the deaths are flattening. No, they have started seeing data. There was like a very short reprieve there in terms of deaths, but the deaths have spiked right on back up in every part of the nation. So, there's going to be a lag between the number of infections, because it takes a while for those folks who have like those very severe cases of coronavirus. It's going to take a minute, particularly if it's very severe and it is indeed life-threatening. People with compromised immune systems or compromised biology already, or not all that much healthy to begin with, especially those folks. You're going to see a lag. You're going to see a lag of about 2 or 3 weeks, and then suddenly we're going to start seeing like those high coronavirus infections. A lot of them out there are going to translate into high coronavirus deaths, and so people got lulled into a sense of complacency. But so it's not a matter of if you're a working parent, you've been under an enormous amount of stress dealing with particularly if you have small children, you have small kids who are before their teenage years. And so even some of the teenagers, like some of these teenagers are out of control, right? But, particularly if you have young kids, and the young kids, and you don't have like a spacious home. You live in a small space already, say, especially if you're in a lot of major cities and you're a renter, you're sharing building space with other people. Everyone's crowded up. And so people are losing patience. And so it's been extremely difficult. So if you're a working parent, of course you want your kids to return to school. Like, people are like, let's not fake the funk on that. Like, there's a lot of folks out there who can't wait for their kids to return to school. They can't wait for us to get on the other side of this, while at the same time very nervous about and frankly very petrified of their kids returning to school and getting sick, getting infected, or also the kids getting infected and bringing that infection or that bacteria back to the household. Because even before pandemic, right, it was always an ongoing joke that, you know, I just got sick from my kid being at school, getting sick from other kids. Children are very effective carriers of bacteria and virus. So, I mean, school settings, public school settings are petri dishes of bacteria and viruses, and they bring them back home. So there's a big threat that's there. So on one hand, you do have, let's not like act like just because it's President Trump ordering school districts to reopen that we don't want the schools open. No, everyone's been having that conversation. Every parent after parent I have that conversation with is like, I can't wait for these schools to open back up because my kids are just like wrecking the house. So people are having that conversation. Let's just be real about that. But it's just a matter of now, not whether or not the schools reopen. It's like, how do you do that? How do you do that safely? So we'd definitely love to get your perspective and insights on that. 215, whether or not you would, do you want schools to reopen? And be honest out there. People need to be honest about that. Of course you want. A lot of people want schools open. So, and that's saying, and saying that you want schools reopened doesn't mean that like you agree with suddenly you've compromised your principles and agree with President Trump. No, it's just like it's just a practical kind of reflex. Every parent I talk to is like, I can't wait for my kids to get back. There are some parents, however, particularly black parents I talk to, who are like, you know what? I kind of dug this being who can afford to do this, who are in a position to do so. Kind of like this online thing. There's a lot of hassle. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of racist schools or racist curriculum things my kids getting constantly exposed to that I didn't like in the first place about a lot of these school settings, particularly public schools. I'm sending my kid, it feels like I'm sending my kid to prison every day anyway. So yeah, let's, so maybe we should do the online thing. So yeah, so there's that aspect of the discussion. A lot of folks liking the approach of doing remote learning and not having to deal with a lot of things from teachers who have a propensity for over punishing particularly black students and black kids, to kids who to other classmates who were bullying their kids, and just all sorts of other ratchet conditions that are inside a lot of schools. So there's some folks out there who kind of like that particular model. So, and what is that model for you? What is that approach? Because now we're seeing school districts now are finally realizing, well, maybe we should do this blended approach. Maybe it should be 2 or 3 days inside the classroom, then another 2 or 3 days or a period of days where they're at home and they're doing some kind of distance learning. So that's something to definitely consider. Definitely want to get your thoughts too. Big protest march against racism that teachers were putting together. Also students also participating in that in Philly, and looking to dismantle racism in school systems like the Philadelphia School District. There's a number of ideas that were put on the table, from some, figuring out ways to eliminate racist curriculum or a curriculum that's outdated and old and is not really culturally competent or racially competent, to removing environmental toxins. That's a big topic, removing toxicity in a lot of these old school buildings. One issue I'm not hearing brought up, I'm not hearing being put on the table as aggressively, but I think it's a big deal, is the number of, or the woeful lack of black school teachers, Like, I think right now, the number, so the Philadelphia School District is about 52%, at least according to the school district itself, in terms of the student racial makeup. 52% of the majority of Philadelphia public school system students is black, right? So 52% of Philadelphia public school system students are black. 21% are Latino, 14% are white, 7% are Asian, and 6% are considered multiracial or other. 24%, under a quarter of all Philadelphia public school teachers are black. So you have a school system that's over half black, that's overwhelmingly majority black, in a city that's pretty much majority black. But you have this paucity, you have this very troubling lack of black public school teachers, and that's something that that's not being brought up as much. Let me go to Reverend Williams out of Mount Airy real quick before we head into Pressing Matters National. Reverend Williams, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Good morning. You're certainly bringing up a great subject. I think that if the schools will open, what he's talking about, if our public school, it should be closed indefinitely. But the private schools and rich people that he knows, it's a whole different ballgame by going back to school. And also, I think the images and the stereotypes over the weekend, they were talking about policemen in Allentown, I believe, had the foot on the neck of a knee on the neck of a man in Allentown yesterday or Saturday, but he didn't die. So that image, we got to stop putting out negative energy of black people, because I think in the long run, most of these white policemen feel that if it's a detriment to society, we need to be killed or something. And I thought about this over the weekend. One of the TV stations did a big thing on ice cream, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't. But a slave invented ice cream. Look at how big that industry is now. So maybe on your show or some shows on URD, you can highlight some of the great things that black folks have done to change the whole world, and people are making big money off of, So I don't know.
Right.
Anyhow, I thought
we did have that conversation too. I think earlier on we had a black culinary expert on. It was months ago, and we talked about ice cream. We talked about ice cream. It was something, and it was, in fact, there's an article about that, and some sort of podcast at the Philadelphia Citizen. I have to refresh on that. There's so much we talk about. We deal with like hundreds of topics a week, right? On Reality Check. So there's a lot of times I'll forget about it. But we did have that conversation, and she was talking about how, about the black roots of ice cream. And so you're absolutely right. I think we need to see more of that. We need to see black people outside of the slavery paradigm.
Amen.
We need to acknowledge that slavery happened, that we weren't, that our ancestors were enslaved. We need to acknowledge. I mean, in some respects, you can make the argument we're still in kind of some sort of enslaved mode, but that's a different conversation for another day. But bottom line is, we need to see ourselves outside of slave illustrations and slavery paradigms. We also need to start pushing for more conversation about our ancestry and about our history before our ancestors reached the shores of America, before they reached the shores of the New World.
Amen.
We need to talk about that, because it's like, it's offensive. It's offensive when, sometimes it's like, when we have this conversation about our history, and then it just stops at 1619, and then it's like black folks didn't exist before that. And then there's this rich history of like thousands of years, and I think a lot of people, well, at least when I was growing up, there seemed to be this big renaissance that was happening like during the 80s and the early 90s, where there was a lot of curiosity about that and a lot of investigation. And I just remember just a lot of conversations and us being very excited at that time, and it was even fused into our music and the hip hop at the time. You just don't see that nowadays. I don't know what happened. It just stopped. And it needs to start back again. People need to restart that. But it was like a whole motif. It was a whole, it was even like a fashion statement, that, and Afrocentricity was that term that was coined. I mean, it was a lot of that. I mean, Philadelphia was kind of the impetus for a lot of that big national global conversation about Afrocentricity or being Afrocentric. Brother Asante obviously played a very big role in that, and other folks, and folks who were friends of the station like Hakeem Madhubuti and others. Were big purveyors of that kind. Suddenly, we don't have that conversation anymore. We don't talk about it. We don't write about it. We don't have, it's like, I find like Disney films, for example, very offensive because Disney films they'll create animated films about every other culture and their rich history and what happened with them hundreds of thousands of years ago. They finally do African culture, and it's voiceovers on animals. And I don't understand why people are not offended by that. Like, I mean, The Lion King was a great film, but it's like, give me a film about Mansa Musa, right? Like, or about Queen Nzinga or something, like, or Shaka Zulu in South Africa. Like, y'all do films for like great, fiery, iconic historic figures in European and Asian culture. Like, what's up with that? Like, so I think that's a big part of the problem.
You're right.
we don't get that kind of respect. Oh, go ahead, finish up, Mr. Williams. I'm sorry.
Let me with this one. You probably know this, but the original, real Lone Ranger was a black ranger who never lost his hat and locked up more people and memorized the Constitution word for word. That was the real Lone Ranger. But the character they showed you in the movie was whatever the guy with the black mask and like. So if we just start telling the truth, that would be a good way to start. Just start telling the truth about what we do it, and we need to do it.
Yeah.
And anything I can do to help people do it, I'll do it.
Right, whether it's over the past 400 years or the past 4,000. Like, just give us the complete picture. I don't, and so, that's why people are constantly dumping. Black folks are like the, cultural dumpster fire for everybody to just like throw trash, because it's like, because people are under this assumption that it's like they can't see us, they can't see our ancestors or our culture beyond being slaves. Oh, those were just the enslaved folks. It's like, no, it was a whole bunch of stuff going on that like our ancestors were doing in different places in different parts of the world long before like we got to this 400-year part. And I think that's there's this massive cultural disrespect that's not unpacked, and that's got to be part of that Black Lives Matter conversation in this moment that we're having now. So thank you, Reverend Williams. I appreciate you. Let me take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to go to Pressing Matters National. Andrew Gillespie and Peter Groff are on tap here on Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the Source lineup on Word Radio. Mondays, get ready for the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. On Tuesdays, it's Andrea Lawful Sanders. Then on Wednesdays, it's the Black Women's Leadership Council. On Thursdays, it's a second helping of Andrea Lawful Sanders. And on Fridays, it's Tiffany Bacon. Don't miss the Source. Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and Fridays, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Exclusively on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on wordradio.com and on the Word Radio app. This is not a fad for us. We will not resume our regular programming when things die down. We're not black to help our bottom line or because it's politically correct. We're not joining a fight. This has been our fight, our message, our people. Black lives have always mattered here. We are undeniably, indefatigably, unapologetically, permanently Black Talk Media. WURD. No fear, just facts. WURD.
These are the sounds of a dinner. A dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check. We are now in Pressing Matters National here on WURD. Andrew Gillespie, political science professor at Emory University, is joining us by phone. Go to @Andrew on social media, on Twitter, more specifically where she is engaged. Also at emory.edu to learn more about the institution where she teaches. And also Peter Groff, former state legislator, former president of the Colorado State Senate, former Obama administration official appointee, now a contributor here on Reality Check WURD. Go to @PeterC.Groff on Twitter, on social media where he's engaged. They join us both here on Pressing Matters National as they occasionally do. How are you both doing?
Good. How are you?
All right.
Good, Charles.
Hey, what's happening? Okay, good. So, I want to talk about real quick the commutation of Roger Stone's sentence of longtime Trump confidant and also political henchman Roger Stone, the president, commuting his sentence, so you will not serve any jail time, essentially. It just basically a lot of people just trying to unpack or explore the president's rationale for that. Does it help him or not with the base? Because there were some Republicans who openly that were very uncomfortable about this move, and they wonder how it could damage the president electorally. And a lot, even Senate Republicans are wondering how is this going to look for me in my Senate race, now the Senate appears, at least according to polling data, it looks up for grabs for Democrats. So want to get your thoughts, Andra, and is this something that the American voter is really going to remember by the time we get to November? Andra?
So, I think that this wasn't a surprise. When I saw the news alert that came on my phone, I was like, of course he did.
Right.
And so, I think that this was largely expected. And so in that respect, I think that it has a wash. I don't actually count Republican senators in particular as being part of the base. So I think for the people who are part of this base, it fits sort of a narrative. They probably expected it. It's probably not going to be topmost in their mind when they are, thinking about sort of whether or not they're going to continue to support Donald Trump, because they thought the whole Russia investigation was a hoax anyway.
Right.
It certainly does underscore this narrative for people who don't like Donald Trump, that he is corrupt and that he is abusing his power. But I think we're actually pretty kind of hard, fast in our camps. And so I don't think that this affects it either way, because there are much bigger problems on which President Trump is going to be judged, and I think that that's going to be the crux of his election. So whether we're talking about COVID or whether we're talking about, race relations in the United States or immigration, right, those are the critical issues. The fact that he hooked his friend up for covering up for him, allegedly, or as he was convicted for covering up for him, I think everybody kind of expected that this was going to happen.
Yeah, Peter?
Totally agree with everything that the professor said. The base would love it because it's the president pushing back against all these folks in D.C. and across the country that are out to get him, who are trying to frame him. It was all fake news to begin with. So they're going to be pleased with it. Republican senators, as Andrea said, are now concerned about their races. So there are going to be some times between now and November when they push back on the president, because they're going to need some of those swing voters to come back to them. So, no, it was not a surprise. Absolutely, it was expected, as the professor said, and, we've moved on to Sunday.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and it's I guess it's just one more thing to add to either Joe Biden or Lincoln Project or whomever, whatever super PAC ads. Attack ads, that we'll see, whether it's online or it's on TV or what have you, and people. Voters have very short memory spans, and so I guess this also presents a discussion, right, Andra? On, you did sort of hint at that just a few moments ago. People feel like there's bigger fish to fry in their mind. There are bigger problems that they have to tackle. Will corruption, whether it's the Roger Stone commutation or it's something else, or the way that we now find out billions of PPP dollars benefited either, folks, Republicans, who are supportive of Trump, or folks within the Trump political and familial ecosystem. By the time we get to November, is it going to be more people voting more on corruption, or is it going to be more on just how he's handled the pandemic, or is it just a combination of both? I'm just real curious to kind of get your thoughts on that.
I would probably veer towards it being a combination of a number of things. I think people are pretty kind of hard, fast in whatever they think about Donald Trump, and there are probably very few persuadable people within the electorate. And so this is just a question of mobilization. And so people have talked about the enthusiasm gap amongst Democrats, where Democrats are saying that they're not particularly enthusiastic about Joe Biden as a nominee. But others have pointed out that, look, this isn't not just about enthusiasm about the candidate, but it could also be enthusiasm about being opposed to the other person. So I just approach this as Trump's base is ride or die, and it actually really doesn't matter what they do. Or what the administration does, right? They're going to be there regardless, and they're going to figure out a way to rationalize their support, even if this goes against their stated values. But for Democrats, this fits a narrative already, right? I didn't need the commutation of Roger Stone's sentence to already think that the administration was corrupt. There was a lot of evidence of corruption There was evidence of incompetence. There was evidence of ill will towards people that actually has serious consequences that's manifested itself either way. So this is just another data point for people that's already going to confirm for folks what they already believe.
Yeah, Peter, so we have Joe Biden on average about like 9 or 10 percentage points ahead. Just in terms of national polls, he seems to be either neck and neck or ahead of Donald Trump in a lot of key battleground states, even battleground states that people didn't expect him to be competitive, places like Arizona and Texas, for example, or Georgia for that matter, other places. Should people be excited about that? To me, it's still tight, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, one, we don't elect presidents nationally, so anytime a national poll comes up on my TV, I bounce over to Sports Center to see if they're running yet another story about LeBron. And then, secondly, it's the middle of July. So the polls at this point don't necessarily mean much, and certainly it's beginning to form the narrative for this election. But I remember walking out of the Omni Arena, which no longer exists in Atlanta, after the 1988 Democratic Convention when Mike Dukakis was sure to beat George W. Bush. Or George H.W. Bush. And so each election, at some point, even Jimmy Carter led Ronald Reagan in 1980. So we have these situations where we are absolutely positively sure in the middle of the summer what's going to happen. This election is all about turnout. When it comes down to it, it's going to be who turned out their base and those swing voters who are either annoyed by Donald Trump or say, everything outside the pandemic is okay, so I'm going to stay with him. This election is about turnout. It's baked in. We already know what people believe about the president, so that's not going to change, as Andrea said. So both sides have to figure out how they turn their folks out and how they ensure that those independent voters stay with them.
So let me ask you, so if it's baked in, so we should know, the polls should be accurate then. So then maybe Joe Biden is realistically, if everything is as we're saying, as like the two of you are saying and a lot of other observers say, people have already decided who they're going to vote for, then maybe these polls are accurate because things are, are so tribalistic and polarized as it is right now, people just voting according to their party. So maybe we do have, for the first time in a long time, we actually have a very accurate picture. I'm just kind of throwing this out here for the sake of argument. We have a very accurate picture of how the electorate is going to behave come November.
Well, I think there are a couple of caveats to that.
Go ahead, Andrea, and then I'll let Peter jump in on that. Go ahead, Andrea.
So, first of all, we typically used national sort of surveys as sort of a proxy because, most of the time the popular vote correlates with the Electoral College vote. But we have seen examples, including 2 in the last 20 years, where it didn't quite work out that way. So it's actually better to try to use surveys that are done at the state level, but the problem with state-level polls is they tend to be more sporadic. The sampling might be a little bit more questionable. They may end early. That was part of the problem in 2016 about why they got stuff wrong. And then second, the part of the sort of reluctance is that, one, after having gotten burned in 2016, I think a lot of people are going to be very reluctant to put themselves out there and to say anything definitively because you always sort of hold up that there's room for error in all of these interpretations. And in particular, we don't know if there is some other exogenous shock that could completely turn the course of the election. And so we know that polls are only good for the moment that they are actually in the field. Like once they're out of the field, even by the time they're getting reported, they are basically a historical document. And so people have the right to change their mind, and they do, which is why we have to continue to track, through October. So we see the trajectory, and the trajectory isn't looking good for Donald Trump, at least as far as the popular vote is concerned. But we do hold out that anybody can change, and especially it's really hard. It gets better sort of for presidential election cycles about being able to identify who a likely voter is, but a year out, people say, oh, yeah, I'm going to vote in November 2020. We don't know if they're actually the people who are going to show up to vote. You start to get a little bit more confident about that kind of as time goes on, but you have to expect volatility, and we can't expect perfection with polling because that margin of error is for real.
Yeah. Oh, Peter, go ahead, jump in. You were about to say something.
I was just based on your comments that, it's baked in at this point. That's why this is all about turnout. There's going to be probably an August surprise and a September surprise and an October surprise. And so it is, and particularly if now states move to mail-in and where people really aren't used to that, it is all about chasing those ballots at that point and making sure that your side and your section, your portion of independent voters gets out and gets those ballots back in, or at least gets to the polls.
Right.
So, we're going to have up and downs in these polls. The race will tighten in polls. Every single race, even if it's a lopsided race, tightens towards the end. So, I would caution my Biden folks to stop measuring the drapes, stop trying to figure out which job you're going to get, and make sure that the ballots are turned back in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Another thing, too, I think that Democrats especially need to do with respect to vote by mail, they need to give everyone a start date. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it can't be everything takes place on November 3rd. Forget about November 3rd. Like, everything starts, it's a whole month's worth of election activity. People are going to have to just stomach it and get through it. Hey, everyone, election starts now, October 1st. You know what I mean? And then, it's just, vote by mail and all that stuff. It's like people need to get, so I'm not getting that sense from Democratic strategists, from different campaigns I'm talking to, I'm like, what's the start date? You know what I mean? And no one can really give me a start date. It's like, just some kind of big kind of major macro date that everyone is in tune to, that all the states with their different laws and different processes as far as vote by mail, but everyone can agree, oh, you know what, October 1st, I'm just hypothetically speaking, October 1st is the day that this all starts. Because I don't want to see people all crowded up and crunched up and crying and whining, standing in line for 4, 5, 6, 12 hours all day on November 3rd at the polls, because they didn't do their vote by mail thing, or they weren't clear about what vote by mail was. That's just my kind of sense about this. No, go ahead, Andra, if you want to comment on that real quick before we go to break.
I think I think we should use Western states as a model for sort of thinking about this, like especially for states where it's not automatically given to you, where you have to request, where you may automatically be mailed an application, but not a ballot. Right? I think that people need to know that, you can't wait until the last minute to request your ballot, and you can't wait until the last minute to turn your ballot in if you expect for it to be counted. So general rule of thumb, you need to make up, you should probably request that ballot on October 1st if you haven't done so already. And you need to turn in your ballot by, October 27th or 28th, just to make sure, like, if you're not going to drop it off in a box, like if you're going to put it in the mail, you need to, give the opportunity for the Postal Service to be slow, and you want to sort of, make sure that you're not getting it in just under the deadline, because you might risk having your vote not counted. And most important, especially if you live in a state like I do, you also need to give it time so that if for some crazy reason they decide that your absentee ballot is invalid, you need enough time to be able to go back and fix that situation so that you can vote.
Hold on,
Andra. Last minute, that's going to be a problem.
Right, Andra, stay right there. Peter, I want you to respond to that too, because Peter, you're one of the architects of vote by mail. Like, you were immersed in that, and I remember years ago, putting that into play when you were in the state legislature in Colorado, and Colorado was the model, the vote by mail, that model that a lot of folks are following. In fact, Philly folks actually just recently went out to Denver to check that out. But so, Peter, I want you to give us some insights on that. Let's take a break. We're here on Pressing Matters National. Andra Gillespie and Peter Groff. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Do you need health insurance for your children? The Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, provides quality, affordable health insurance for Pennsylvania kids. CHIP ensures that kids can go to the doctor, receive health screenings and vaccines, and get what they need to live a healthy childhood. Families can be covered by CHIP no matter how much money they make. If you've experienced a recent change in employment or income, CHIP may be a good option for your family. Visit chipcoverspakids.com to apply or learn more.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Be heard.
Be heard.
Want another way to join the conversation?
Follow us on social media
Using the hashtag onWURD.
Be heard.
Stay connected to Word Radio.
Independent Black Media.
Times are changing, and you deserve a system designed to grow your business. Meet Jaxcom, the new standard in business class voice. Only Jaxcom gives you the most features per dollar. Things like visual voicemail, call monitoring, advanced call queues, virtual assistant, plus a lot more. The stuff the other guys charge you extra for or don't have. Jaxcom proudly supports Black-owned businesses. Reference WORD for 20% off any plan. Jaxcom. Visit us online at jaxcom.net. That's JAXCOM.net.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
All right. We're back at Pressing Matters National here on Reality Check. We got Andre Gillespie, Peter Groff. Peter, give us some insights on that, like what you think, or kind of some thoughts on how this should be administered when, particularly for, I know states, it's going to vary in terms of the dates when you request your ballots, when you mail those ballots in, when you start everything. But, do we need like that one big kind of universal start date to get this thing going?
I think there's two questions there. One, to try and change elections nationally, we can't do that right now. So trying to figure out if there's just one date where ballots are sent to every registered voter, which we made sure of in Colorado. And I remember us going through the arguments when we first started to do it in Colorado. And I was initially against it because I thought it would handicap older voters. I thought it would handicap voters of color, just varied on how the voter rolls were put together. So we wanted to make sure that every single registered voter got a ballot. We tried to make sure that there was no payment to send it back in. And most people don't know, but if you do send it without a stamp, it's going to be delivered anyway. Don't try it. You didn't hear that from me. Make sure that there's a stamp on it, significant, sufficient postage to get it there. So there was a number of things we tried to do to protect the voter. And now there has been an increase each year in the number of people voting in Colorado, and the turnout has been tremendous now that they've gotten it together. So I think that there's that piece. And to your point about the Philadelphia folks going out, if I were Tom Perez, I would make sure that every Democratic chair that I had went and sat down with the Colorado Democratic Party and to talk to them about the success that they've seen in terms of getting voters out, chasing those ballots once they're mailed. Colorado does it about a month early, to your point of maybe October 1st, and making sure people don't sit on it. And there is a huge campaign. The campaign then ends September 30th, basically, when the ballots come out. There then is an effort with just about every elected official and other folks of influence to say, get that vote in right now. And then churches have done a good job of kind of rallying folks, having them bring them in and then taking them down to the city and county building. So that's what I would do on the political side. On the more policy side, we have to change the way that we vote in America. It should be done, and you and I have talked about this offline. What about doing it from Friday morning to Sunday night? Making sure that every registered voter has an access to ballots. This idea that if you don't vote over 2 or 3 election periods, you're then off the rolls. We just had a recent primary in June here in Virginia, and there was no coverage of it. And so when I dragged my family, all 4 of us went and voted, that we voted at noon, and we were about the 20th through 24th people to vote that day, because there was just no idea that there was a primary that day. So we need to run elections better and obviously more efficiently in this country. And I think starting it and voting over 2 or 3 days and making it a big thing and giving folks time off to do it would be a way that we could begin to start to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Hey, so I'm gonna switch gears here, switch topics. There's this push, big conversation over the weekend, Andra, about opening or reopening schools. When do we do that? And so I'm real curious, in your mind, how does this play out politically? It's interesting to kind of watch the administration pushing schools to reopen and reopen fully, not really embracing the blended learning, mix of online learning and classroom approach. Because, it's kind of like a blended thing. A school choice thing is a very Republican thing to do. So why wouldn't you embrace that? But what's this all about? I mean, is it just all about setting up another epic fight with Democrats, or identifying which Republican governor is really with them or not, heading into 2020, heading into the election?
Well, I mean, I think that this is just a larger reflection of how the administration has handled the COVID crisis broadly. And I think primarily the goal of, Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos is to help use education to further the aims of reopening the economy. So this is about the economy. This is about the fact that parents can't work effectively when they have to simultaneously take care of their kids and work from home. And so by opening up schools, what they're hoping is that frees up workers to kind of come back fully into the economy. And there are important reasons why kids should be in school, why they should be interacting with people their own age, and why what had to happen in the spring was probably not optimal for many children's learning, and not wanting kids to lose an entire year and what the long-term implications of that are. I don't want to minimize that at all, but let's just be clear about what's motivating the Trump administration. It's about reopening the economy, and they're going to try to do that at all costs. It was funny listening to Betsy DeVos on the Sunday morning talk shows yesterday. The way that she mentioned or got her charter thing in there was to basically talk about sort of the threat to withhold funds. So if public schools, are skittish about reopening, perhaps there's a charter school or a private school that's more than happy to reopen, and we're happy to give them funds for that. So in some ways, it seems like this is a back way to do what Betsy DeVos has long been an advocate for, to have vouchers and to have charter schools. So and that way, it was just really interesting to hear her say it. I think it was on George Stephanopoulos, where she kind of showed her hand in the situation. That still doesn't address the larger situation of how safe is this. And so I get that kids are not the target demo yet for COVID, but we didn't think that people in their 20s and 30s were either in March, and now we're having an about-face about that. So I don't want kids to get sick, and even if kids seem to be able to manage the virus well, it's a question of the teachers who have to be with them, because it's not like we just throw kids in a classroom by themselves and they have no adult supervision, right? They're adults who are all in the school, and then there are the adults that they may, if they get sick and they are contagious, and I know that there are some questions about how contagious kids are they going to bring this back into their homes with their parents and their grandparents and thus cause bigger problems? So I think we have to think about this. And then as a university professor, my university, every university in the country has had to grapple with, okay, are we going to invite students back to campus? Are we going to do sort of all online semesters? And the fact that they have now tied visa restrictions to whether or not your classes are being held all online, right, is serious, is really important. I don't know if the administration realizes that international students pay full freight. So they're actually really important for colleges' bottom line.
Right.
So if you're saying that we can't have students on campus who are international, who happen to be taking all of their classes online in their dorm rooms, there are serious financial implications for that. And if you don't want colleges closing, then maybe you need to rethink sort of how this affects your immigration policies. So, there are just all kinds of things that I don't know. I see the carrots and sticks that the administration is trying to use, but I don't know if they actually fully thought through what the implications of all of this are.
No, I mean, Peter, it's all political reasoning, pretty much. For example, not letting foreign college students in, or snatching away or revoking their visas so they can go to. They're not thinking. They never thought about, oh, hey, this is a demographic that that supports, that holds up these mightily expensive institutions, right? They're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about, oh, this sells to our base. See, we're keeping more, foreign peoples out of the country. So this just works. But they're not totally thinking about, oh, that's like one big segment of the higher education economy. So it's just all political rationale. But I want to get your thoughts, Peter, on, I mean, what's the responsible way, what's the safe way of reopening schools here?
Not the way that the administration is talking about it. Every single thing between now and November out of the president's mouth will be about how is this going to help me get reelected. Everything he says and does, it hasn't necessarily been in the best interest of Americans up to this point. It absolutely will not be moving forward. And that was so clear with Secretary DeVos yesterday, who I've met, who I know somewhat. And her sycophancy during this time in the administration has just been deplorable. And what she said yesterday in terms of we've got to get these schools open, and that was her push. Her push yesterday was speed over safety. And that's going to be the problem because, one, the federal government has nothing to do with schools opening or not. That's going to be up to the school districts to make that determination. And I heard her point, Secretary's point about charters, and I saw another interview where she dropped it because charters are public schools. Despite the fact that they have some freedom, they still, on a variety of different issues, still have to deal with the district. And if the district says the district is closed and not opening, or we're going to do it this way, then they're still going to have to deal with it. So she dropped it and then went to the private school push, which requires dollars, which she's talking about holding back so that parents may not have the disposable income to put their kids in a charter school anyway. And so there's a lot of talk, a lot of lightning and fury and a whole lot of other stuff coming from Washington, D.C. But when parents have to decide, as I'm going to in this week with my rising senior in high school, whether we send her back, it will be the districts that give us options on what to do and the options that my daughter has in terms of going back to school or not the President of the United States.
Hey, going to sports real quick, because the announcement just came out this morning that the Washington Redskins will indeed change their name. So not that it makes any bit of difference for a Philadelphia Eagles or Philadelphia sports fan like myself or any others, but
or a Denver Broncos fan,
or a Denver Broncos fan, like right. I'm not sure exactly which team Andra stands for, but I want to get your thoughts, Andra, real quick. The influence of decisions like this on the political landscape, because I thought that like kneeling back in 2016, that had an impact, that had an influence on that election.
Well, I think that what we have seen from the protests is that the protest is exposing things that we have tolerated in our society that demonstrate and perpetuate inequality. And so this has been a longstanding issue, but the George Floyd protest sort of created an inflection point where people just demanded that we deal with certain things. And that not only do you see sort of, artists and celebrities kind of coming behind it, but we've seen commerce kind of come behind it because it's good for business. So even though my dad lives in Montgomery County, PA, and so my brother is a rabid sort of Philly sports fan in terms of basketball and football, we grew up in Richmond, south of, D.C., so Washington was our team. And, yeah, I didn't realize sort of how offensive that was as a child, but this is something whose time has come. And just that name was so offensive that it didn't, that for the last few years I have had a hard time. Like if I wanted to talk about football with respect to Washington, all I could say is Washington. I was reluctant, not that I did it all the time, to actually use the mascot because just that name was obviously offensive. And so I wish I had thought about maroon and gold until this morning when it finally occurred to me, I could have been calling them the maroon and gold the whole time and been fine. But this should have happened a long time ago. In my own city, Atlanta has decided that, that the Braves are going to keep their name. But again, we've got to revisit this because when, should we be using people as mascots? And then especially when these communities tell you they don't want to be mascots. And I know that's not everybody in the Native American community. But like we should be sensitive and responsive to that.
Let me real quick. Let me get Peter here. I give him about 30 seconds a minute. Peter, should it be like Washington Red Tails or something? Because I've heard that name kind of thrown out there after the Tuskegee Airmen.
Tuskegee Airmen, yeah. And I've heard Red Tails, Red Wolves. I think it might be Warriors. About 5 to 6 years ago, Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Washington professional football team, actually trademarked that name in a variety of other trademarks around what could be the design and that name. So I suspect that's where they'll go, but it's obviously well past time to do this because it was racist and offensive.
You think you might end up becoming a Washington Warriors fan since you live in the D.C. area?
1,000% no, because it's not going to make them any better. They're still going to be trash. So
it's going to be trash. And it's still half the people that live in the region will be Cowboys fans.
Will be Cowboys.
I've never seen anything like that. Yeah.
I think so much of it is just to be contrary to the ridiculous sports fan that lives in the DMV, as we apparently call it.
Well, but back to Andre's point too about the racism and sports teams, and especially more specifically like professional football. The parents of those current Cowboys fans, the black parents of those current Cowboys fans, a lot of them became Dallas Cowboys, or at least the way they explained it, they became Cowboys fans because the Redskins were like one of the last teams to finally integrate in a really significant way, get a black quarterback. And people were just like through with people in the DC area were like, this is a majority black place, a majority black town, and you guys are like, so you're just running this team in a redneck way. That's what they really should have called it, Washington Rednecks. Because it's just for so long the way the team operated and the kind of fan base they responded to. I'm late. I got to take a break here. Let me let you both go. Andre Gillespie, Peter Groff, joining us here for Pressing Matters National. Thank you both. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. Phone lines are opening. If you have questions for him, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. Let's talk to Larry Krasner when we come back here on Reality Check 96.1 FM 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. We'll be right back.
Don't miss the Electric Magazine Show, hosted by Cody Anderson and Vicky Leach. Saturday mornings from 7 a.m. till 9 a.m. Exclusively on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Are you looking for financing for your business? Well, the doors are open at New City Commercial Capital. For businesses in a position to grow, we are offering 100% financing for commercial real estate purchases. That's no down payment, no closing costs, absolutely no money out of pocket. Plus, the CARES Act will pay your mortgage payment for the first 6 months after closing. Do not procrastinate. This program ends August 1st. Give us a call today at 484-454-3592. New City Commercial Capital. Financing solutions for today's commercial customer.
Pico has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. Have an old working fridge or freezer in your garage or basement? Pico will pick it up, dispose of it responsibly, and give you a $75 rebate. That's right, $75. Plus, you can save as much as $150 a year on your energy bill by getting rid of it. Just schedule your pickup at pico.com/recycling or call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE today. Be sure your fridge or freezer is plugged in and working at time of pickup.
Now, with more clarity, this is Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Streaming live at wordradio.com. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
Okay, phone lines are open while we wait on the city of Philadelphia's top prosecutor, Larry Krasner. He's scheduled to come on with us during the 11 o'clock hour, but phone lines are open while we talk to him, because in case you have questions, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900, just part of our official tradition here on Reality Check. If you are a Philadelphia elected official, you must answer questions from the listeners. So 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Phone lines are open while we wait on the city's top prosecutor, Larry Krasner, District Attorney for the City of Philadelphia, Larry Krasner. He's supposed to be joining us next. Obviously, one of the big issues on everyone's mind in the City of Philadelphia is the high homicide rate and just the high rate of violence. Philadelphia is just on a lot of levels an unsafe town, and so people having concerns about that, and rightfully so. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check while we wait on Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. So hopefully he'll be joining us very shortly. We are looking forward to that happening soon. Raphael Suleiman, good afternoon to you, watching us on Facebook Live. Really appreciate that. Arnetta Pierce, watching from Arizona. Thank you so much for watching us from way out west, from the deserts, from the sands of Arizona. Also, Suleiman Ali, striking a rather somber tone. Unfortunately, things are going to get worse. Desperation leads to desperate activities and outcomes, probably talking about the high rate of crime, of violent crime that's happening in Philadelphia, not just in Philadelphia, but a number of other cities. And I didn't get a chance to have that conversation with Andre Gillespie and Peter Grofner of Pressing Matters National, but it's the role of crime in the 2020 election, the role of crime in the 2020 election. And don't think that that will not play a role, but it will definitely play a role on some level in this upcoming election. And Republicans in particular President Trump, will look to capitalize on that. So that's something that, particularly in a lot of major cities like Philadelphia that are in big battleground states like Pennsylvania, and Democrats who, do politically, technically, run the city of Philadelphia, they're going to have to work that out because Republicans are definitely going to look to exploit it. Also we have Eggy Potter here on, I'm sorry, before I get to that, thank you, Mike Jackson. Bass Reeves is the black lawman who the Lone Ranger is based on. He looked up over 3,000 outlaws at that time. Thank you, Mike Jackson. So a little bit of history lesson. We need that history lesson. We need to see more of that. That's just important. And we need to see these actual events. We need to be getting as excited about and as immersed in the actual great things that Black people did and Black people continue to do. We need to see more of that. We need to see more of those stories. We need to see more of those narratives. That's important. Also, Gloria Gainey, great show. Thank you, Gloria. Really appreciate you. We do have the DA on, Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner is joining us, the city of Philadelphia's top prosecutor. Go to phila.gov/district attorney at PhilaDAO for more there on social media about your prosecutor's office and what he's up to. And he joins us by phone here on Reality Check. District Attorney, how are you doing, sir? How's everything?
I'm doing well. How about you?
All right, hanging in there. I know you're busy, and so I always appreciate your time. It's been a while since I've seen homicides in Philly being below 20% above where they were at a similar time last year, and people are asking, what are you as the city prosecutor doing about that?
Well, we're actually doing a lot, but I think we also need to put all this in context. The fact is, as the New York Times has reported in the last several days, what we are seeing nationally is a huge uptick in homicides and shootings in major cities, the vast majority of major cities all over the country. So, we're in a funny moment here. What we see in a lot of cities is that many crimes are down, and in fact, in Philadelphia right now, violent crime overall, including homicides and including numbers for shootings, violent crime overall, which would be rapes and gunpoint robberies and aggravated assaults, all those sorts of things. Overall, it's down. But we have this terrible spike in homicides, and it's a terrible spike in shooting that is happening, as I said, all over the country, including New York and other cities. We need to be that in context. We need to be honest about the fact that these are unprecedented times with the pandemic, with unemployment, with a Great Depression happening. And, for example, we've seen this incredibly huge spike in Philadelphia in commercial burglaries. The increase is 240%. 240% in commercial burglaries, and yet we've seen a lot of reductions in other areas of crime. So we need to make sure that we don't just report the bad. We look at the bad. We also look at other things that are going the other direction, try to figure out what to do. What are we doing specifically?
Because people are going to ask, like, and I know, and I've heard that that reframed over the past several years. Overall, historically, violent crime is down, but if you're living in a distressed neighborhood in a place like Philadelphia, people are not looking at those historical patterns. They're just seeing the violence that's in front of them now.
I totally agree with you. For people who hear shots outside their house and they have a report that some young person was killed 2 blocks away. All of that is true and important to know, but it doesn't help them on a daily basis. So what are we doing? What have we been doing? We've been doing a lot of things. I mean, one of the things we've done is our CARES program, which is new to this administration, where we help the families of people who have been killed in many important ways, including relocating them, including trying to protect them so they can be witnesses for prosecution. Another thing that we have done is a first of its kind in Philly, collaboration with the police department, where we are putting our prosecutors at all 6 police divisions around the city, so that for the first time in the history of the city, we can assist with the investigation of shooting. Why is that important? It's important because the reality is the rate at which those cases are solved is too low. And I don't say that to throw anybody under the bus. We are all in this together. But we are going to have to improve the level of solving those crimes, or we're going to end up where we are now, which is, we made an arrest the other day after some great police work, great work by my office, but it was an arrest of a man who had killed 4 people, who was a contract killer, right? We do not want to be arresting people at killing number 4. We don't want the killing to happen at all, but if it does, we want to get them at killing number 1 so that we can save those 3 lives as we move forward. So that's the second thing that we are doing. The third thing that we are doing is we are participating in the city's gun violence intervention program, which is a much improved version of the pilot that happened previously, where there will be a message essentially sent out to groups of people who are shooting other people, and the ones who are the most violent and the ones who are the most recent are going to get a message that enforcement services as well, but enforcement is going to be coming down on them or they quit.
Yeah.
This is a system that has shown success around the country. It's one that we've been stepping up to do since the very beginning of the administration. It got slowed down by the pandemic, but, we believe that that's going to bear some fruit. And, there are more things that we are doing. There are more programs that are rolling out. My view of this is that this is an ongoing process. The city's going to have to resource it properly, and I think it has been a problem. But we're trying to do things that are proven to have been somewhat successful in other cities because, we get it. We feel your pain. If you're in a neighborhood where people are shooting and people are being killed, we get it. We feel your pain, and we want to work with all the other stakeholders to solve these issues.
I'm real curious, too, how much you worry about the heat. Because there is that direct correlation, that linkage. You have climate change, you got, urban heat island effects. Philly is always, and it's been on the upward trajectory. There have been international newspapers and publications that have covered heat waves in Philly. That's how severe the heat waves are. And I wonder how much you're thinking about that, how much you're being intentional about it. Because the one thing that's unfortunate this summer is that because of pandemic, because of the physical distancing, we have to keep cooling centers closed. There's not much. The city really relies on a comprehensive cooling strategy, not just to keep people cool, obviously. There are public health reasons for that, but also to kind of help with violence. And I wonder if that's something you're thinking about, if that's something you're being deliberate and intentional about.
Well, there's absolutely no question that there has always been an increase of crime that is seasonal, that goes with warming of the weather. When you have periods of time that are sunnier and that are warmer, there's a clear correlation between criminal activity and violence. And that sort of, and that weather in an urban environment, there's nothing we can do. Don't have any weather machines, we can't change that.
Right.
It certainly is a factor, and the whole situation is more complicated, and it is exacerbated by the reality of that a lot of people who would be present on the street who could potentially be witnesses, and by simply being there, might slow down somebody who's in a red-hot hurry to go shoot someone else. They're not there. The people who are shooting at each other, for the most part, they don't think they're going to live to be 30, for the most part. And these are not people who are concerned about taking risks in the way the average person is. So, this may be part of the reason that we are seeing the shooting and the homicide spike going on. Obviously, there are other reasons. There are reasons that go back a very long way that are structural and that are affecting all of it. And we can't take our eyes off of that just because we have a crisis in terms of the shootings and the homicides. But yes, all of these factors come together.
Yeah. We have a listener who's calling in who wants to speak with or has a question for Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. We have Libby out of South Philly who's calling in for a reality check. Libby?
Good morning, Mr. Ellison and Mr. Krasner.
Good morning.
I'm calling because I was assaulted, and when I went to court for the day that my assault didn't happen. So I'm trying to find out, where do I go get help to go to court for the day that I got assaulted?
Okay, I want to make sure I understand you, Libby, and thank you for your call. You are saying that you were assaulted and there was an arrest in your case? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
There was a case and you went to court for a court date on your case. Is that right?
Yes.
And when you went to court for the court date, what happened?
It wasn't about the day that I got assaulted. I got assaulted on November the 20th. I got assaulted on November the 16th. And they took me to court for an incident that happened on November the 29th. That had nothing to do with my assault.
Okay, when you say they took you to court, do you mean you went as a witness? You went to testify against someone?
No, I was supposed to then, but when I went to court, they took me for a day that nothing happened. He brought a police officer to my house the day nothing happened, and that's the day that they took me to court for. They didn't take me to court for the day that I got assaulted. So he walked away free.
So did you end up arrested yourself, Libby?
No, I did not get arrested, but I almost died from the injury that he done to me. And they let him walk away free.
So let me say this. Obviously, something is not right, and I want to fix it. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Ellison to do, because I don't want to put it out for the whole public, is to get your cell phone number, an email from you, and I will have my chief of major trials, Erica Rebstock, contact you directly so that we can get to the bottom of your situation and we can resolve it.
Yeah, Libby, if you can, before you hang up, if you could give your number. Yeah, he put Troy Wilmore put you on hold so he can get your number, and then we'll relay it to the Philadelphia DA's office. Thank you for that too, Larry. Appreciate you handling that. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900. If you have questions for your city's top prosecutor, Larry Krasner, he's joining us right now. He is the district attorney of Philadelphia. Also at DA_Larry Krasner. For more there. I did want to have an opportunity to talk with you, Larry, about the new Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You're one of 3 big city prosecutors in the country that's participating in this. There's San Francisco and Boston are the others. We did talk with Attorney Lee Merritt about this last week. Talk about the role that or how Philly is expecting, your office is expecting to roll this out. What exactly is this Truth and Reconciliation Commission? How significant will it be?
Well, I think it could be very significant because the history of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions where they have worked is that they tend to, not only do they bring out the truth about things that may not be prosecutable, but that have happened historically and that have been very harmful to the community, but they tend to result in changes in policy. They tend to result in a restoration of trust, some kind of reconciliation between institutions or individuals who have harmed the community and the community. What happened in South Africa. This is what has happened in places like Greensboro, where there have been Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. The fundamental idea is that the toolbox of criminal justice is pretty limited, and especially where it has failed. And, for example, in post-apartheid South Africa, you couldn't go to the institutions to go back in time and punish the atrocities that were committed against, black South Africans by the Afrikaners. You couldn't do that, but you had to do something more than pretend it didn't happen. And so, it is true that there is a legacy of prosecution, I said prosecution, and policing that is racist, that has been unjust, that has been against poor people and other groups of people, marginalized people in general, and that we have to do more than just pretend it didn't exist or to say, well, too many years have passed, we can't do anything. So this is why it is a pilot program in Boston and San Francisco. In Philly, the idea is for district attorneys who all have track records of actually trying to be fair, and I'm proud to say the other DAs certainly have that track record, and I hope we do as well. It's a pilot program to see whether there can be some coordination between the district attorney's office and the community, civilians, who would actually receive information, make decisions, and try to bring some, not just truth, but try to bring some kind of justice, some kind of a reconciliation, some unity out of it.
And this is not just in terms of the Philadelphia Police Department, but this is also in terms of the court system as well, in terms of how the court system operates. I know at least that what Lee Merritt was saying last week, you know, kind of looking, because I don't think that that's touched on enough, but I know in Philly in recent months, there have been some reports, there's been some conversation about how the Philadelphia court system operates, about the staff, about the racism in the staff. We had like a very public example of this play out. For example, someone getting fired who was a part of the family court. So people have been feeling for years not just victimized by certain bad actors or bad players inside the police department, but also by the court system as well.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I am the chief prosecutor in the state system in Philadelphia, and I've put my office out there. You know, I believe that we have to look at the harm that has been done within the court system, within prosecution, within policing. It's not just police. We got to look at all of it. We got to expose it. We got to improve it. We got to change it. And yes, that certainly includes the court system stepping up.
We're talking with Philly District Attorney Larry Krasner. We have Titan out of West Philly who's calling in for a reality check, has a question for the DA. Titan?
Hey, yes. Hello, gentlemen, and to Mr. Krasner, I'd like to say shalom. I wanted to know about the Philadelphia or the PA hate crime law, and if your office is involved with trying to implement something to deal with the systematic discrimination that African Americans deal with, especially in the medical industry.
So,
yeah.
Thank you for the call. The hate crimes law is fairly narrow, and what the Pennsylvania statute says is if you commit some other crime and you do it because of hatred, essentially, it could be racism, it could be a few other things, but if you're doing it because of hatred, whether it is, you know, I hate to say it, but whether it is a lynching, whether it is a beating, whether it is some form of harassment being brought down, then that is a separate crime on top of whatever other crime you commit, attempted murder, assault, harassment, whatever it may be. That is the criminal scope. There is an entire body of civil law, though, which is, handled in civil court, which has to do with discrimination.
Right. Pardon me, Mr. President, because I only have a little time to speak. I understand what you're saying. I do civil law. I'm familiar with 42 U.S.C. 1985-3, 123, the Ku Klux Klan Act. But the issue is getting government, like I think you should be Attorney General for the country because you're, like, honest. And I see, you know, your father who was a crime fiction writer and your mother who was an evangelist, they did a great job, and I really appreciate you. But I'm trying to find out if you can help me deal with an issue in Philadelphia. I could reach out to your office. I'm not worried about.
Why don't we do that? Yeah, why don't we do that, Titan? Because and Titan, if you can, we'll put you on hold because I think we ran up on time anyway. Because I think it's an important question that you're raising, Titan. And if you can leave your number with, that can be another number that Troy Wilmore he'll collect. He'll put you on hold before we head into break. Get your number and then. Right, Larry, if he can get in touch with your office about that specific case, that would be great. We'd appreciate that.
I have the chief of my special investigations unit, who is Tracy Tripp. Contact you directly so we can get more details from you, Titan. And thank you for your call.
All right, excellent. We've been talking with Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. Go to @DA_Larry Krasner @PhilaDAO directly for the DA's office, phila.gov/district attorney. He's been joining us here by phone on Reality Check, as he occasionally does. We appreciate his time. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, DA.
Always good to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will, and thanks for folks, Libby and also Titan. Thank you for calling in as well. We appreciate you all taking advantage of those moments that we have. We have special moments with Philadelphia elected officials, and phone lines are always open for an elected official in Philadelphia. So please do take advantage of those moments if you have a key or an important question or things to handle. That's it's always a useful session or a useful exercise. Let's take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be switching guests and topics. We'll be talking with the Center for American Progress's Alex Tasanovich, and we'll be talking about vote by mail, and what are the best practices as we head into the 2020 election. Coming up next here on Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Always Best Care is a great place to work. Flexibility,
leadership, purpose,
great benefits.
There's never a dull moment.
Diversity, inclusion, compasión.
We love our jobs. If you're looking for a great place to work, you can join our compassionate Team Green. You can apply online at teamgreenabc.com or call 267-909-9248.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
This is Word Radio, independent black media.
Part-time job, full-time hustle, all-time Shiro to all of us. You nurture, we listen. You teach, we thrive. You lift our spirits, but we've got to lay down the truth. It's time for you, our Shiro, to stretch for the stars. Start saving more for retirement now, so you can feel prepared and live your life to the fullest. Get free tips to help boost your retirement savings now at aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
A message brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check. We're now back. We're getting into a CAP corner, which we do in conjunction with our partners in Washington D.C., the Centers for American Progress. Also, Patricia White, thank you so much for that question. I'm going to pose that question on Twitter. The district attorney is very responsive on social media, on Twitter, but Patricia White on Facebook Live was asking during our segment with Philly DA Larry Krasner. Good morning. Is there a date when the court system will be operated in a way that people can be prosecuted? So just a key question. Junior Lee also asked, what can a prosecutor do about shooting? DA did address that a little bit earlier on. Sort of had this sort of three-point program or three-point strategy that he laid out. So, but it's a very big task. It's an uphill battle that City Hall has, that the DA, the Philly Police Department, and a lot of other players have to get violence contained, reduced significantly in Philadelphia. And the times are indeed in many ways unprecedented, but there's some things that they can do. There's some things that aren't unprecedented. Some things about this violence have been going on for a long time, and people have been knowing for years what to do about it. So we'll continue to have that discussion as it relates to violence in Philly and also elsewhere. I've been talking to some folks in other cities who are dealing with some similar issues and want to get them on this program, and we will. Alex Tasanovich is the Director of Campaign Finance and Electoral Reform at the Center for American Progress. Go to americanprogress.org for more information, and also to read his latest briefing, Local Governments Can Lead by Mail, and Alex returns on the program. We have him on every now and then to talk about issues like campaign finance reform, redistricting. I think it was the last time we talked with him about gerrymandering and redistricting. Always fascinating conversations. Always appreciate his research and analysis. We have him back here on Reality Check today by phone. Alex, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Charles.
All right, thank you. So your latest briefing, you talk about how, as it's titled, local governments can lead by mail. So talk a little bit about that. What did we see local governments do in these recent primaries that was different from previous exercises, previous vote by mail exercises, and anything that kind of stood out to you and that was forward thinking?
Yeah, so we have seen a lot of different action taken by local governments. Some local governments are being very responsive to the fact that we have a pandemic going on and we need to take greater steps to ensure that people can vote. Some local governments are doing well, some poorly. But one of the things that local governments have done that I think is among the most effective steps they can take is that some local governments are sending out absentee ballot applications to all registered voters, and that makes it a lot easier for more people to vote by mail. It helps preserve their right to vote, helps keep them, helps allow them to vote in a way that is socially isolated so they're not getting sick, and takes pressure off the polling places on Election Day.
Do we, because, you know, there's a big conversation too, Alex, about voter suppression and about like how elections officials, like particularly on a statewide basis in a lot of different states, battleground states, and particularly like southern states, are engaging in that. And so how much can we trust those efforts? There's a trust factor that's there. I think that hasn't been unpacked or addressed significantly yet in that bigger conversation about how much we're going to need elections officials to carry out this vote by mail function.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one thing that we're seeing going on is some people are just casting doubt on all types of vote by mail. You know, we have the president saying vote by mail causes fraud, and that is, there's absolutely no evidence of that. There are 5 states right now where their elections are all by mail, and those include a range of states, including Utah, which is a deeply Republican state, where everybody votes by mail. So vote by mail is something that is almost always extremely safe and secure. It's done widely. I mean, members of the military as well rely on vote by mail and have been voting by mail since the Revolutionary War.
Right.
So, you know, it's definitely a good system for voting. There is an issue of trust with local officials, but, you know, that's part of the reason why local officials need to be taking affirmative steps and need to be pressured to take affirmative steps to expand vote by mail and other things that they need to be doing to ensure that people can vote during the pandemic.
Which were the ones, you know, talk a little bit about that. I mean, like you mentioned, Utah, they have like universal statewide vote by mail. I know a lot of people are watching Colorado. I know in Philadelphia, the election, the local municipal elections commissioners took a trip out to Denver to have a sit down, a conversation with them about, like, and to also see, okay, well, this is how we do vote by mail. What are the municipalities that the specific municipalities, you know, go over that you like to highlight, or that you highlighted in that briefing, that you think we should be following? Right. So in Pennsylvania, the biggest county was Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh is located, and the county government decided on its own to send out absentee ballot applications to every voter. And as a result of that, about 12% of all the voters in the state of Pennsylvania got absentee ballot applications in the mail. So that gives you a sense of the fact that, you know, people think county governments, they're kind of small, you know, maybe not as important as state governments, but a few big counties can actually ensure that very large numbers of voters get those vote by mail applications and are able to vote by mail. You know, if the top 10 counties in terms of population in Pennsylvania did the same thing, you would see over half of all the voters in the state get those vote by mail applications, even without any action on the part of the state government. And we're actually close to that in some other states. Like in Florida right now, I think 6 of the largest counties have already taken this step of sending those vote by mail applications, and they're at about 40% of all registered voters getting those applications. So that's a really big impact in terms of allowing voters to vote by mail easily. I saw in Pennsylvania, and like, you know, looking at Philly more specifically as an example, as a case study, because I remember before, like even up to the day of the primary, a lot of seasoned political observers within Philadelphia, and people watching that closely, because Pennsylvania is going to be a battleground. Southeastern PA, Philly are going to be very crucial in that battleground. But people were like saying the turnout's probably going to be like 10%, 15% at best, because, you know, you got the pandemic going on, and then you got like the Philly was like a big, massive epicenter of protest and unrest. And so, and the June 2nd primary was happening at the same time. It was mildly successful. I mean, it's not the kind of turnout that I like or you would like. I mean, but I think it was like 33% turnout overall. That's not bad, like, you know, especially when in a time like this, and especially when the last pre-pandemic primary or local election of that scale, it was just like 28% turnout. So I was actually quite impressed by that. So I'm like, okay, if it can get like that, and and you got both stay at home and protest unrest happening at the exact same time, what's it going to look like by the time we get to November? I'm real curious too, Alex, get your thoughts on alignment, right? Between, you talk about how the county, local, municipal elections commissions or elections functions, administrators, how crucial they are, how we kind of take those for granted. We don't watch what they're doing. But then you got the state level. And in some cases, the state level elections officials will supersede them, right? And so how do we, or you might have a sense where you're like, you're politically blue city and your elections administrator functions in a very blue way or in a more open or voter franchise friendly way, but then you live in a red state where the election, the Secretary of State is probably not that friendly to voter transparency or voter accessibility. And so how do you strike some sort of alignment or congruity there?
Right. Well, there's a lot of states like that right now. One of them, for example, is Wisconsin. And the city of Milwaukee, similarly, that was another example of a city that proactively sent absentee ballot applications to all of the voters in Milwaukee. And what you saw there, which I think is really positive, is that the state election commission, which is made up of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, it looked at what happened in Milwaukee and said, well, we can't just have this one relatively blue city get these vote-by-mail applications. And they instituted the same policy for the entire state. Now everybody in Wisconsin is getting the absentee ballot application. So that's a positive thing. That's an example of how sometimes these blue cities can end up leading the state in that direction, because Republican leaders in those states don't want their voters to be the ones that get left behind ultimately. But that's good for all of us because that slows the spread of the virus and it reduces the burden on polling places. Because it's also important, and I think I really need to be careful to say this. It's also important that we keep in-person voting options. They need to be safe, but we still need to have those as well because a lot of people rely on in-person voting. It's particularly true of African American communities, Native American communities. Some disabled people really rely on in-person voting, particularly people who have sight impairments, for example. So we have to have those options as well in addition to vote by mail.
Yeah, I wonder about this too with vote by mail. It's a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate this briefing you put together at AmericanProgress.org. We're talking to Alex Tasanovich. He wrote this recent briefing at AmericanProgress.org. Read it when you get a chance. Local governments can lead by mail. So we saw some bright spots in terms of how the election can be carried out. And basically, put ourselves in a situation where not all is lost. I know, people are tense as I am every passing day as we get closer to the 2020 election. But Alex, I wonder, I wonder about a number of things with respect to this with vote by mail. When is, in your mind, what's the universal kind of like flip on switch date, right? Like when I mean, I know different states have different times when you make your mail ballot request, when you get your mail ballots mailed back to you, when you can start kind of putting your votes in the mail. Should there be some like universal date that everyone is operating on to make sure that this is all successful? I just don't want a situation, and I'm sure you don't want a situation where everyone's rushing to the polls, to your point just a few seconds ago about we need to keep the in-person voting open. We need to keep that option available, but I just don't want this maddening scene of folks. They knew they had the vote by mail option. They knew they had, like, say, a whole month or more to vote by mail, but yet everybody's rushing to the polls and standing in line and getting suppressed because they're standing in line for 5-6 hours, or they don't get there in time, so the poll station's closed. How do we avoid that? What's like that universal date in your mind? Is it October 1st? Is it September 15th when this whole process starts?
That's a really good question, and I think, the only answer is the sooner the better, because a lot of it depends on what the state deadlines are, how much resources the states are investing in making sure there are plenty of polling places.
Yeah.
How much resources states and localities are investing in ensuring they have enough people to count all the ballots in a way that's responsible but also not taking too long. So all of those things are factors, but it has to happen. Time is absolutely of the essence with all of this.
Right.
States need to start, if they're going to send out absentee ballot applications, they need to do that soon. We are seeing more counties roll in, even since we published this report. There have been counties in Iowa, some major cities, other places. So it's important that it happens now. It's important that they start preparing sending these absentee ballots, but it's also important that they take steps like, for example, at the state level, what you'd want to see is states expanding early voting, for example, because if you allow people to go to the polling place in the week or 2 weeks, ideally, before an election, then you reduce the burden on election day itself. So there's a lot of different steps that these states can take to make sure that election day goes smoothly and we have a fair process and a fair outcome. But they need to start preparing for those things as soon as possible.
Yeah, we need that as soon as possible. I would take that extra step. Adding or amending that somewhat, Alex. You're right. The different states, particularly the battleground states, need to be clear on exactly when that starts and need to start as soon as possible. There's power in like national movements, as they say. So we got into a great kind of national vote by mail, hashtag vote by mail rhythm. I think what will be more helpful is if people are getting bombarded with this message, this like constant drumbeat message of this is the date that it all starts, like this big national moment or movement, vote by mail starts, I don't know, I'm just hypothetically here, September 15th. Okay. And they're off, and I think, everybody constantly getting bombarded with that national message and like, hashtag the date or hashtag the date vote by mail. Because while you have obviously those efforts taking place on the state level, but just everyone knowing, hey, this is this big thing and you got to do it. Just like how, the Census Bureau is pushing like everyone to take the census. Hey, everyone, this is the date you got to start doing a vote by mail. Hey, it took states like, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, what was it, California, Utah, you mentioned a while ago. It took them like years, like almost a decade to implement vote by mail. We've been doing this in a matter of weeks in some instances. And so are we worried about like running so fast with vote by mail that we end up tripping?
Well, we've learned some lessons from those states. So I think that puts us in a better position. Some states like California have moved beyond just sending out applications, and they're sending every voter an actual ballot, which is fantastic. So, yes, I mean, it is harder to do, to put together a more heavily vote-by-mail system in a shorter period of time. But if we start taking those steps sooner rather than later, it's absolutely doable. Some states have already had primaries with huge numbers of vote-by-mail applications, and they managed to have a relatively smooth election. So that gives me some hope for November that we'll be ready. But we're only going to get there if we start working now. And I think you're absolutely right. If we can have a more consistent national message that's really helpful. I love your idea about, emphasizing a set of dates across the country. But the other side of it is that this has unfortunately become somewhat partisan. There's a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Some states are being responsible, others not. And I think where that leaves us is that at every level of government, federal, state, and local, officials just need to be doing everything they can and not necessarily waiting for leadership from above that level.
Yeah. The other thing too, real quick here, Alex. Last question is as far as security and just the robustness of the Postal Service. How can we rely on this Postal Service system if we're already worried about it being strained and being underfunded? How do we sort through that? Do we look for alternatives that can't be contested by the other side, as far as making sure that ballots are getting to those election offices?
Yeah, the Postal Service needs more resources, and, localities could use more resources too. Congress should pass the HEROES Act, which would provide, $3.8 billion for local governments to run their elections. That is a problem. One thing that some localities, including Philadelphia, have done is set up absentee ballot drop boxes. That's a way to make it easier to vote by mail and to reduce the burden on the Postal Service. So there are ways around it. It needs to be all hands on deck.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking with Alex Tasanovich with the Center for American Progress. He's the Director of Campaign Finance and Electoral Reform there. Go to AmericanProgress.org and also check out his latest briefing, Local Governments Can Lead by Mail. That's what we've been talking about. And definitely, I'm sure we'll be talking with Alex throughout the duration of this this hot, caustic summer, this summer that's already intense. As we head into the 2020 elections, everybody anxious, and Alex, I know, looking at that very closely and how things shape up in terms of the process, the electoral process. Alex, thanks for your time as always.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
All right. Good talking with you as well. Go to @Alex Tasanovich on Twitter, on social media where he's engaged, @Alex Tasanovich, TAUSANOVITCH. So pretty much how it's spelled. You can check him out and engage with him there and get the latest on what he's up to. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, phone lines are open at 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. Also, at the top of the noon hour, we're scheduled to talk with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Joyce Beatty is out of Ohio, is a Democrat representing parts of Columbus, Ohio, mostly Columbus, Ohio. She's also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. So that's part of our ongoing conversation, our near weekly conversation that we have with the Congressional Black Caucus. So that will be coming up in the noon hour. But in the meantime, phone lines are open at 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Emerge is a public service announcement campaign produced by Mirror Arts Philadelphia and sponsored by the City of Philadelphia to inspire our community to emerge resilient and hopeful in the face of COVID-19 and systemic racism.
COVID-19 inside my city, germs in the air that's trying to kill me. Can't come outside, I feel like prison. Everything shut down if it's a business. Okay, we got the Emerge. Every often wash hands. Come outside with a mask. This is a COVID caution preparation. Please put your mask on. They're closing down schools, and that was these kids' backbone. They say it can spread for if you get it, so please stay quarantined so you won't send it. Everybody using Zoom calls. Yeah, that's good on business, but ain't nothing like a hustler that's out to go get it.
Come on, y'all. Let's teach the youth not to go through the system. Do positive, think positive. You might look back, see you winning. I'm starting a business, networking, communicating, trying to stay out of prison. They know I'm Mr. Fix It. If I got to speak as a voice, then I want them to listen. The streets is different. They closed down the school and just opened a prison. Germs evading, so I'm keeping my distance. I need a mask and a glove like I need my utensils. We will emerge.
To learn more, go to mirrorarts.org/emerge. How will you emerge?
Support independent Black media and join the onWURD movement now at 215-425-7875 or visit wordradio.com.
These are unprecedented times, challenging how the YMCA works to strengthen community as we have for nearly 170 years. But we've always found ways to help people and communities in times of crisis. Right now, Ys across the country are providing emergency childcare, shelter, food programs, and outreach to seniors, but we can't do it alone. Whether you're connected to the Y or have a fond Y memory, we need you to stay with us. Reach out to your local Y today and stay with us for a better us.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check. We have phone lines open at 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. Let me go to Maurice out of North Philly, who's calling in for a Reality Check. Maurice, what's good?
Yes, Charles, how's everything?
All right, what's happening?
I got a few questions and I got a statement.
All right, go ahead.
Did you ever read the federal statute on the crime bill? And in the book, The New Jim Crow Law by Michelle Alexander?
Yeah, it's been a while since I read that, but I did go through that. But go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So did you see the correlation, how the pipeline from school to prison was created? And
I do, yeah.
Pennsylvania played a major part in the crime bill. Upstate Pennsylvania was taking black kids from Philly, sending them upstate to juvenile halls, then the courts up there will put them in prison. You had two judges was convicted of that. In the late 1990s and 2000, when Rendell was the governor, Philadelphia to take people who didn't deserve a state sentence, to give them a state sentence and send them upstate. And in turn, Pennsylvania, when he was the governor, was sending Pennsylvania prisoners that was convicted to Michigan, to Iowa, and to Virginia.
Right.
out of state all on profit.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talking about voting for someone that had this type of thing, we have to truly understand that this man took people from our neighborhood, which is slave code, and sent them to another neighborhood to generate income for that neighborhood, which was the coal miners or the farmers. That has to be that has to be talked about.
Yeah.
My second point I want to make this point. I heard you talk earlier about the Philadelphia and Washington Redskins. But in the history of sports, Philadelphia and Boston are the most racist organizations in the history of sports. Philadelphia owner, and I'm highly upset that you have black news reporters or sports analysts going at Deshaun Jackson. When Philadelphia owner, Eagles owner, who's supposed to be a Jewish white man, he was one of the owners that colluded against Colin Kaepernick. He was one of the owners that didn't let his players protest and kneel about social injustice and police brutality, but he had the nerve to say, which is false, that this man is anti-Semitic, which is false. So let me. Semitic means black people, and that got to be talked about.
Yeah, it does. I'll say this. The thing with Deshaun is that, like, okay, things you don't do on social media. I mean, it's just kind of common sense, and so I'm not like going to take a position like on either side of this, because it was just, it really was stupid on the part of Deshaun Jackson. Like, if you're going to like write things on social media, don't start paragraphs with Hitler said. you just don't do it. Like, that's just things that he should have had common sense enough to know, you know what, don't openly quote Hitler in a social media post. Like, just don't do it. And so, I mean, beyond like the other conversations, so it's like, it was just a Deshaun Jackson, not the sharpest tool in the shed moment. I'm just being honest about that. And so it's like, and so what do you expect? If you do something like that, and then so, and I think the more important conversation, particularly now, there's a big conversation about, and I might be writing something in the Philadelphia Citizen about this week. There's always this big conversation about the black. Every now and then when something like this happens, well, let's start exploring the level of tension or the interaction or the relationship between black people or the black community and the Jewish community. And so it gets into like, the inarticulate or impolite things that people say on either side, the things that like somebody like a Deshaun Jackson might write on social media, or the things that like Minister Farrakhan may say when he's out in public, so on and so forth, or something that some Jewish person, something they said about black people. But we don't get into like the economics discussion. And I think that's why we just haven't made any progress for a long time on that front with respect to that whole conversation about like who said what that was anti-Semitic or racist. There's a big economic conversation and experiences that like black communities, for example, have had in relation to Jewish communities or perceptions of Jewish people who work in, like the financial services sector, for example, and so the experiences they have directly with them, or, we keep having these conversations about, how do we all get along? It's like, no, we need to have a discussion about economic parity, right? And about like, also Jewish communities or Jewish people or Jewish professionals, whether they be lawyers or financial service sector professionals who operate in black communities, and what sort of role do they play? Do they play helpful roles or do they play predatory roles? We need to have those conversations. That's a conversation we just will not have, and like especially when we get into conversations about black Jewish relationships or black Jewish relations. Like especially Jewish community, they don't want to have that conversation. They want to like have a conversation about how do we get along? How do we like, let's just take busloads of black folks and Jewish folks and we'll go to the Holocaust Museum, which I think is an important exercise. I think that we need to know those histories because they're very, and I'm saying this as someone who's been to that museum. I've been to the original Holocaust Museum right outside of Tel Aviv. I went to that museum. It's just thinking about it right now, like the images I saw is enough. It brings you to tears. I mean, and so just as they need to see the experiences we went through. So I think that that's important. But as long as we keep in the economics and the economic parity issues and like, stuff like, everything from banking to gentrification out of it, we're not going to get anywhere with that conversation. And so the other thing too, Maurice, is I understand with you, as far as talking about the 94 crime bill, that is a conversation that is being raised. But, you know, and I know, you know, people have this issue about the 94 crime bill, and then they have an issue about voting for Joe Biden. It's like, okay, well, what's your alternative? Like, who do you vote for? And so that's my thing. I was like, well, what's the alternative plan? What's the alternative political strategy? If, like, it's not going to vote for Joe Biden, what's the alternative political strategy to get us out of the madness that we're in, right, to fix the current madness? You know, that's my big question. That's the question that everyone, that even folks like you, are going to have to answer. I think, do we still have Maurice out of North? I don't think we do. But we'll, you know, I'm sure we'll talk to him again. Let me go to Maurice out of Southwest, who's calling in for a reality check. Maurice?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about two quick things. First of all, I want to talk about the schools. Hell no. I don't think you should put kids in jeopardy like that, because kids on the street now are not wearing masks. So what, you expect them to go to school and they're going to keep them on? Every chance they get to pull that mask down, they're going to do it.
Right.
When they go to the bathroom, when they get in their little groups or whatever. So we're not prepared yet, and it looks like Mr. Height is not preparing people to be prepared yet.
So let me ask, real quick, Maurice, I want to ask you, so what do we do with kids? I'm not, when I pose this question, I'm not being facetious, and I'm not being like, I'm not saying it in such a way that I support the push to reopen schools. It's a real question. Then what are we going to do with all these kids? What are these kids going to do? They're just going to keep staying at home?
No, well, the problem is it's not the kids' problem. It's our problem. We're not solving it.
Yeah.
We keep talking about the kids. Look, all this time these schools have been closed down. Don't tell me they haven't been sanitized yet, and they're not prepared yet. Because if grocery stores and dollar stores can get prepared to take on customers, you mean the school can't get ready by now? They done had all the time in the world to get ready. Plexiglass, things that you can wind over people to desensitize them from the virus. They got all kinds of things out there they could be using.
Oh yeah, there's a whole lot of best practices now people doing.
But look, let me get to my other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Larry Krasner was the wrong guess, in my opinion, for what you were talking about. If you're talking about the crime, you should have had the police commissioner in there.
Yeah, we're working on getting her again. Yeah.
Yeah, he presses the charges. The cops got to bring him to him for him to do his job. The police commissioner is out there. I don't see no plan, because like I said, I live out southwest of the Badlands out here. I don't see no police presence. I don't see no mini stations. I don't see no foot patrols. I don't see anything. And you know, a lot of murders happen in this city that never get reported on television. Everybody think what they see on TV is the news. No, the local papers actually carry what actually happened last night. The smaller papers, they have accounting of the neighborhood papers about who got shot, who got this in the neighborhood. And, you know, we always talk about the murders, but how about this? The 800 or more people that have been shot, a lot of them are disabled and all kinds of stuff that we're going to have to pay for. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, next time, please get the police commissioner. And guess one thing, people, I want people to understand. She don't work for us. She is the mayor's pawn. She works for him. If she don't do what he says, she's out of a job. So all this talking about wrapping your arms around her is nonsense. Just let her do her job. I don't care if she's purple. I just want her to do the job.
All right. Yeah, no, I hear you on that, Maurice. Yeah, it is. We're working on that. So it's just a scheduling thing. I'm sure we'll get the police. We had her on at one point. I think it was about a bit over a month ago. And so we'll bring her on again, Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw. So we'll look forward to that discussion, and we'll do it soon. I think we really need to just go to break. And when we come back on the noon hour, we'll be talking with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. She is Congresswoman out of Ohio, representing Columbus, Ohio. She's also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we have, this weekly discussions, ongoing series of discussions with the Congressional Black Caucus. They've been kind enough to provide under the current leadership of Congressional Black Caucus Chair Karen Bass, who's been wonderful, just been absolutely wonderful, providing us each. They don't have to do it, and they have done it. I got to give them some credit for that. They've been providing us each week, providing you, not us, reality check, you. That's a real rare treat that I don't know if people realize that's a rare treat to each week get a Congressional Black Caucus member on particularly a radio station that is basically as a foundation is a local big city radio station, and so we've been getting like every member of the Congressional Black Caucus on here each week on Reality Check. So we continue in that conversation. We missed them last week, but we have them this week. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty is coming up next here on Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you want to start your morning with mindfulness, motivation, and inspiration, tune in to Daybreak with me, Helana, here on WURD Radio, Monday through Friday from 6 to 7 a.m. I'm a health and wellness coach with over 15 years experience helping people to transform their lives. On the show, we talk health and wellness 360, from getting your mind right to getting your money right. So let's rise and shine together right here on WURDradio.com, 96.1 FM, 900 on your AM dial on Daybreak every morning.
Pico has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. Have an old working fridge or freezer in your garage or basement? Pico will pick it up, dispose of it responsibly, and give you a $75 rebate. That's right, $75. Plus, you can save as much as $150 a year on your energy bill by getting rid of it. Just schedule your pickup at pico.com/recycling or call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE today. Be sure your fridge or freezer is plugged in and working at time of pickup.
JD's Auto Body and Painting is hiring talent for the following positions. Assembler, preferably 2 to 3 years experience, able to tear down and reassemble all make and model cars. Painter, must have at least 5 years overall painting experience, including experience in water-based paint and able to prep cars for paint jobs. Auto Body Technician, looking for an A or B technician, must have at least 5 years experience repairing cars. Please send your resume to JD's Auto Body and Painting at Comcast.net. That's JDS Auto Body and Painting at Comcast.net. Or call 215-848-5349 for more details. JD's Auto Body and Painting is an equal opportunity employer.
This is Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Independent Black Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
All right. Phone lines are open until we get Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. 215-634-8065. Toll free. It is 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065. Toll free. 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Yeah, that's the big question. So I agree. I mean, it's like until you have like a real good public health defense plan in place for students, if you're telling them or forcing them to return to schools, then it shouldn't return to schools, right? You know, because you're going to make a bad situation go to worse or get elevated to worse. But then what is the strategy? What's an alternative strategy? If people don't want, we got to start talking in like strategies. Like, okay, we've identified the problem. School districts, like a school district like Philadelphia, there's a lot of questions there, right? There's a lot of questions for a lot of major urban center school districts, Philadelphia included, whether or not they're prepared to even take those students back in a time of pandemic. Bad enough that we've been having issues. The Philadelphia Public School District is one of the most environmentally toxic, environmentally distressed school districts in the country. And so there was already issues there. You could never even, I mean, there are situations in Philadelphia district school buildings where, you can't even get like soap dishes filled up, right? Or soap dispensaries opened up, where you don't even have paper towels, you don't even have toilet paper. So when you go into the bathrooms, they have to actually close the bathrooms because they don't have like kind of some basic supplies that are in those bathrooms. So for when those kids can use them, even though, sometimes like you get those knuckleheads that want to do stuff like, fill toilets up with toilet paper and things like that. Like, sometimes it's like, it's a combination of the district being misapplied or undersupplied, and sometimes it's just knuckleheads. Like, it's like some of y'all out there got like bad kids. But anyway, yeah, so there are questions around that. But then what is the alternative strategy, right? Like, what do we then do with our children in light of a school system that's not reopened, or what do we do as an alternative to that? Let me go to Carol out of North Philly, who's calling for a reality check. Carol.
Hi, that happens to be Sister Carol. I love WURD. My comment is, take it back to the old days. It needs to be more parenting involvement. They need to have the parents to go. I know it's not their job to clean up the schools and to watch stuff, but we need more parent involvement.
Yeah.
I think it would make a difference, and I think like the 1 or 2 days a week and a couple, not that many kids, not that many. So, different days for some kids and stuff. I think all that would make a difference. But I think the parenting environment would really, really go a long way. And it's hard because you got a lot of young parents that, that's the furthest thing from their mind.
Right.
If somebody would suggest more parent involvement in the day-to-day learning of your child, it would make a difference. It would really make a difference.
You know what, and Ms. Carroll, you are 150% spot on with that assessment. You are your child's best advocate. No one else is going to advocate for your child better than you. I mean, you cannot expect people who did not give birth to your child, who did not raise your child. I mean, yeah, they're obligated in the capacity of their job to provide adequate services for your child, but that's really, I mean, if you want to see your child through as best as possible a successful matriculation through school, you have got to be that parent advocate. It's just full stop on that. And people at one time understood that. There are a lot of folks out there who don't understand that now. Still a lot of us who do, but a lot of people have kind of moved away from that. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's your child and it's your responsibility. The second thing with that, what I love about that, Ms. Carroll, too, is that, like, we talk about kind of the disparity, the gap between distressed, poor, low-income school systems like Philadelphia and then compared to the suburbs, and or like school districts or schools that have, like, majority white students and majority white parents. I mean, they have, like, they create complex, like, parent clubs or PTAs to provide fundraising and resources. And so in the absence of money, distressed neighborhoods or distressed communities, okay, well, what else can we do? Like, we don't have money to create big pots of resources to buy supplies or this or that, or to be like a high income or middle class PTA. But maybe we could do X, Y, and Z. I think you're spot on with that assessment. People have to think creatively. Okay, well, maybe we can figure out days we can go into school and help clean it up, because we understand that school's not getting a whole lot of money. You know what? My child goes here. On one hand, yes, I'm going to put pressure on the school district, the school board, the school superintendent, and the state to get equal funding. But you know what? That's going to take a while. So in the meantime, I'm going to make sure I get soap in these soap dishes, paper towels, toilet paper. Let me see if I can, at least if you got 100 parents each doing that, then it kind of like raises the amount that's going into that school. Let me get Bree out of Germantown before I ramble on, who's calling for a reality check. Bree?
Good morning.
Hey, how are you doing? Good morning.
Afternoon. I don't know if it's afternoon yet.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, good afternoon. Right. Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment on the schools possibly reopening. I'm just concerned whether or not it's safe, because they keep saying that people of color and African Americans are disproportionately getting the COVID-19. And So
yeah.
I really don't understand it, how we can just open the schools. Now, of course, you have to think of solutions. Can they use laptops at home? I don't know how that worked out. Was there any report on how that worked out when the schools did shut down? And can they continue that? And the only other thing is, if they do reopen, which I think is going to be totally unsafe if it's true that we're going to catch it quickly, maybe starting there. I know that a lot of people are saying 3 days a week. Well, maybe in the African American community, because you got to take it by the community and the school. Maybe start 1 day a week or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Then do computer learning and make sure everyone has a laptop. And do computer learning 3 days a week.
And broadband, because you can't access, right.
Yeah, I don't understand why Comcast can't help out in Philadelphia. I don't understand that, because they're charging people an arm and a leg for their services. I don't see why they can't get back.
Free broadband for all K through 12 students should be universal.
Yeah.
I just for the students. I'm not saying giving free broadband to everybody in the city, but
no, just the students.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's it. Full stop. Yeah, I don't understand that.
The only other thing I wanted to say was also that I do know for a fact, because I have relatives that are attending Philadelphia public schools, and right before the COVID shutdown, I told a family member to ask their children, was there soap and paper towels in the bathrooms, and they all said no.
Yeah.
And this is before COVID.
Yeah.
So I really, really don't know if they're ready, number one, as far as sanitization and sanitizing and cleanliness. And because it's people of color, that's another problem. And bringing it back home and I don't know. I just don't know if they're ready. And I think we need to take a really, really deep look at this before we just throw the kids back in school. And I understand that parents have to work, too. So that's another challenge. Parents have to work, and they need some place for the kids to go. It's very, 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 very confusing.
Yeah.
Have a blessed day.
Yeah. No, I thank you for that, Bree. Those are things that we have to think about, and we'll continue to kind of unpack that and assess that, and come up with better ways and better solutions. Let me go to Elias he hung up. I think we're supposed to be getting, or at least Troy indicated that she might be calling any moment now. We're supposed to be talking with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. She was scheduled to join us, but the schedules do get a little dicey sometimes. Sometimes they can be late. Junior Lee on Facebook Live says, Charles, CBC is not doing us a favor. Shouldn't they be breaking their neck to talk to us? So I agree with you, Junior Lee. I'm not saying that they were doing us a favor. I'm just saying, reality check in terms of pulling that together, it's a Herculean task. The hat goes off to Troy Wilmore also for putting that together. It is very difficult to get that kind of consistency on a weekly basis. However, I do want to thank the communications folk over at the Congressional Black Caucus. At least this year, this particular chair, Congresswoman Karen Bass, has been very helpful giving us that kind of access. Let me go to Ann out of North Philly, who's been calling in for a reality check. Ann? Oh, I'm sorry. We do now have the Congresswoman, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Everyone, go to beatty.house.gov for more information. She's representing the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio. That is Columbus, Ohio, more specifically. And she joins us here on Reality Check. Congresswoman, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, I am doing well, and thank you so much, Charles, for what you do in giving us a reality check.
All right, thank you. And I do apologize, Joyce Beatty. I may have mispronounced your last name there. I do apologize for that in the rush of things. But you can go to Beatty, beatty.house.gov for more information on you, and good to have you on. Thanks for that. Appreciate the kind words. And so I want to get your concerns, Congresswoman, too, about the reopening, because that's been a big conversation over the weekend. I know you're paying attention to that right now, too. The reopening of schools, what exactly can the administration do in terms of punishing school districts with federal funding? Because I don't think folks are too clear on that.
Well, it's interesting. I just got off a call with my congressional team because we're getting hit all over the nation about, do we hybrid, do we open up, do you put teachers at risk, do you put students at risk, do you reduce the funding? funding because tuition people are paying. A parent called me over the weekend and said, I'm not going to pay this astronomical tuition for my child to be doing her class at the dining room table. So I think, and we have teachers who are in that age group. So I think it's more than somebody simply saying, we're going to open all the schools up, or we're going to close them, or we're going to punish them if they do half full glass, half empty. I think we have to sit down and be very strategic, because there are hot points in different parts of the country that may dictate different things for different places. There are some places that their COVID numbers are minuscule, and there are others that they're skyrocketing, and millions of people are dying. So I am a big proponent of education, and certainly, as I said to a group a few days ago, of black students. You know, when we have students who are marginal, black or white, but specifically concerned because of the disparities about our black children, they can't afford not to be educated or in school. So I think with the federal funds we get, broadband is mandatory. You know, in 2020, we should not be in a position where a school in any neighborhood, but in our black neighborhood, it is acceptable for us not to have hotspots, to provide broadband, to provide iPads, to provide tools. If you go into some of the schools over the summer, right here in my district, and I know it's true in Pennsylvania as well, they have teachers going to the students' homes, teaching them science and working with them. So I think we have to get creative. And I think the federal government has an obligation to hold the institutions, the teachers, and ourselves liable for not educating our kids. And look, let me just end with this on this education thing. This whole thing about black kids having inferior education has nothing to do with COVID-19. We've been behind the 8 ball with our books, with our schools, all over this country. So maybe it's something that's going to move the needle, that when we look at the communities where little black children are, that we need, and I'm including all of us, that we need to be more on point, having federal funds targeted those same schools where there are disparities. And so that is the half full of the COVID, that we need to worry about bringing the schools up to standards. There are schools that didn't have air conditioning, and the kids were at home for a week or more because they couldn't go into the school. That's only in lower income and African American areas or rural areas.
I'm happy you mentioned that too. Real quick, I want to go back to rewind on that conversation just a little bit. There are a couple other topics I want to get to as well, but real quick on schools. As far as universal broadband, because I've heard a lot of folks complain about that and trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what's a new role that the Federal Communications Commission could play in opening that up? I mean, should that be a condition of doing business for cable and broadband companies? Like, provide, I'm not saying free broadband for everyone. I'm just saying, at the very least, free broadband for all students K through 12. You can't do business, or you can't conduct business unless you're providing in school districts free broadband access for all K through 12 students. Are you having those conversations, or is the Congressional Black Caucus having those conversations directly with the cable and broadband companies, with the AT&Ts, the Verizons, the Comcasts of the world, and saying, hey, this has to be a utility now, just like at one time radio was a utility. After a while, it was considered like everyone has like open air free access to that. It should be the same thing as far as broadband is concerned. Can you hear us, Congresswoman?
Can you hear me now? You are absolutely right. And let me take it a step further. Our majority whip, James Clyburn, he has not only been pushing for this, he's launched a new House task force on broadband that would provide the coordination and leadership to end that rural, that inner city digital divide. And he has been pushing for that. And as you know, we're getting ready to look at our infrastructure plan. And part of that whole infrastructure plan, I will guarantee you, will have broadband internet in it, and some of the things that you just mentioned that we have to do. I mean, it's not acceptable. We're in the 21st century.
We're talking with, if you're just not tuning in, we're talking with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. You can go to beatty.house.gov for more information. She represents the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio. That's Columbus, Ohio, more particularly, or more specifically, and she's joining us here on Reality Check. Congresswoman, I did want to ask about unemployment benefits and about, just real fear about those benefits not being extended past July 31st. The House, through the HEROES Act, extended unemployment benefits. It's just languishing in the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has said, hey, listen, I'm open to another stimulus or a round of stimulus. And so with no hope of unemployment benefits extensions getting through, do we feel like another stimulus can sort of fill that gap? Maybe that's the compromise there.
Let me just tell you, absolutely, whether it is another stimulus, whether it is us extending beyond July, we are in July right now. And certainly we have to do just that. We have to have another stimulus package, and I think you will see that. And the other thing is, it stops July 31st. We're in the middle of July right now.
Right.
So one of the things that we will see people talking about is an extension to the end of the year. We're also making sure that we do that. And when I say the end of the year, let me just say I've been supporting us doing extending it through January 31st of 2021. We're already saying we're closing down things to the end of the year. We're not opening all businesses up. So I think we have to reevaluate where we are now. But let me just tell you that I want everyone to know, especially when we talk about small businesses and the 1099s and the gig businesses, through our small business committee, which we've got a brother on that committee as vice chair that's right from Pennsylvania, Congressman Dwight Evans, and with Congresswoman Maxine Waters and with Karen Bass, who has been amazing and opened the door to black media especially, and I'm vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I'm chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. We are really looking at what we can do. I even have a bill that's called More PPP, because we need to put more in. I think one of the best things we did was unemployment for small businesses and for those who were 1099. And then when the extra $600 was added, many people were saying, oh, people aren't going to go back to work. Well, that's not true. People hit the lottery for millions of dollars every day, poor people, and they keep their jobs. And they continue to go back to work. So I don't think $600 for people who were making less than the minimum wage, many of them anyway, or were in businesses where they lost everything. I think when we talk about spurring the economy, well, you know what the folks are going to do with that $600? They're going to buy food. They're going to go into the stores. It's going to go back into the economy. It's going to help their businesses continue. And so I think for the time and the place with this pandemic, with the disparities, that there is no way we should be complaining about the unemployment or the $600. I think if you want to incentivize people, then let them go back to work, keep the $600 to pay their rent and their mortgages and other things until they get on their feet. And then it's a win-win. If they're my employees, then I'm made whole because my employees are back at work. And they're working every day and are able to pay their bills.
We've been talking with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and go to beatty.house.gov for more information on her, representing the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio. She's been kind enough to give us a little bit of time this afternoon here on Reality Check. And go to @RepBeatty on social media, on Twitter more specifically, to learn more about what she's up to, particularly if you're in Ohio. We do have Ohio listeners, Congresswoman, and some of them may be in your district. So we appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yep, thank you. Stay safe and healthy.
All right, you too. All right, we'll talk to you again at some point. Let's take a break. When we come back on the other side, phone lines are open, 215-634-8065, toll-free 866-361-0900. I think we're scheduled to talk with Dr. Nicolette Lewis-Saint of Healthcare Ready. Is going to be coming up next, and obviously a lot of conversation. We're going to have a lot of conversation about schools reopening, kind of where we are as far as pandemic is concerned. That's coming up next here on Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Weather and traffic to keep you informed for your drive home in the happy hour with Sincerely Sarita. Monday through Thursday, 4 till 7 p.m. Right here on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Family Therapy Vignette Moments with Dr. Lucille Ijoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you miss me from the protest line and you can't find me nowhere, well, I'll be 6 feet back with my mask on, and I'll be shouting right there. Yes, I'll be shouting right there if you miss me from the protest line. Now, if you miss me from the protest line and you can't find me nowhere, Corona may track us. I'll do the right thing. Shelter in place somewhere. Yes, shelter in place somewhere if you miss me from the protest line. Now, if you miss me from the protest line and you can't find me nowhere, gotta go and register and vote on time. Yes, I'll be voting on time. Yes, I'll be voting on time. So now, if you miss me from the protest line and you can't find me nowhere, I gotta go and register and vote on time. I hope you do the same thing. Yes, I'll be voting on time, folks. I'll be voting on time.
No fear, just facts. This is WURD, independent black media.
Do you need health insurance for your children? The Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, provides quality, affordable health insurance for Pennsylvania kids. CHIP ensures that kids can go to the doctor, receive health screenings and vaccines, and get what they need to live a healthy childhood. Families can be covered by CHIP no matter how much money they make. If you've experienced a recent change in employment or income, CHIP may be a good option for your family. Visit chipcoverspakids.com to apply or learn more.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
Okay, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app, as well. Waiting on Nicolette Lewis-Saint, Executive Director of Healthcare Ready. She's scheduled to be on with us at this segment at this time. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Phone lines are open in case you have questions for her. You just want to join in on that discussion, or right now while we wait on her, if you want to continue past discussions, 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let me see here, going a little bit back and looking at our Facebook live stream. Word TV on Facebook, facebook.com/forward. Bilal El Muhammad said earlier, there's no trust in the system, so we can't really blame people for not being really motivated with no trust in the system. So Bilal raises some good points there, because we do have a crisis in confidence, and we had a crisis in confidence long before, like, the Trump administration came into play, a crisis in public confidence in government. There's been declining trust in government that's been happening over some time. 75% of Americans overall believe that overall American trust in government has been shrinking. And 64% and this is adults, this is according to Pew Research, 64% of adults believe that American trust in each other is declining. So we don't trust the government and we don't trust each other. 64% of adults believe Americans' low trust in the federal government makes it harder to solve problems, and 70% feel the same when it comes to trusting each other. It makes it that much harder to solve problems. And so Bilal raises a very interesting point. We have this crisis in confidence, and it's one of the key reasons that we're here. It's a discussion that we don't have enough of, And so as a result, we've arrived at these points, and we're in this very tribalistic, polarized environment. And but to Bilal's point, it's something we just have to fix. We have no choice but to fix it. We have got to fix. We have got to reverse that trend. We can't have a situation where the majority of Americans are not trusting in, whether it's the federal government or their state and local governments as well. We have to have some basic level of confidence, because if we don't have basic level of confidence, basic level of trust, and where the vast majority of us believe that because of that lack of confidence or that declining trust, it's harder to solve problems. What's that a recipe for, Bilal? What is that a recipe for? That's a recipe for like straight disaster. That's a recipe for the complete like disillusion of society. That's social instability. We can't have that. We can't have that. So if we all have an expectation of an optimal quality of life, or for the societies that we live in, the communities and neighborhoods that we live in, we're hoping for the best, and we also want the best for our children and our grandchildren, then we have to figure out a way to solve problems. We have to figure out a way to make government work for us. Can't just hang it all up and just say, oh, well, I don't trust in government, so I'm not going to participate, I'm not going to vote. Every person who pulls out of the process is another person who is essentially just giving up on just society itself, because you're not participating in that process, you have no say. And so that's kind of like one of the foundations of kind of making these societies and governments work and be responsive to you. So that trust issue has got to be worked out. We do have Nicolette Lewis-Saint. She's now on, Executive Director for Healthcare Ready. Go to healthcareready.org for more information and tips on how to get through this pandemic and what you need and resources for getting through this pandemic. And go to @Dr. N. Lewis-Saint on social media if you'd like to engage her there. She joins us by phone. Phone lines are open too, by the way, in case you have a question that she can answer, as she's been helping us navigate the pandemic over these past months. And so it's good to have her on here on Reality Check. Nicolette, how are you doing?
I am all right. How are you?
All right. I know it's been busy. Yeah, I did want to get your thoughts on, because it's the big schools reopening debate. I mean, it's not a matter, it seems like we're headed in a direction where it's not a matter of whether or not the schools reopen, it's a matter of how. Like, how do we do this in such a safe way? I'm sure you've been looking at this and talking with a number of people, and also working in conjunction with a lot of people to ensure that this is done in a safe way. What's the conversation been like? Where do you think this should go?
Sure. So I think there are a couple of things we need to start with. First and foremost is the reminder that in the grand scheme of things, we are still learning a lot about this virus. And, I've been joining you, I want to say since March maybe, to talk about what we've learned about COVID. Every week we learn something different, and it doesn't, I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that we know how we're going to reopen schools, which will reopen in more than a month. So I think that's part number one. Part number two is we are still under a federal government and not a national government. And I think I say this maybe once a month when we talk.
Yeah, no, it's good to remind us. Go ahead.
These are decisions that will be made by local authorities. These are not decisions that will be made as a one-size-fits-all for the entire nation. And so the most important part is that local authorities, based on the conditions, what they know to be true for public health in their jurisdiction and what is happening within their city, their state, their county, are taking that information and doing what is appropriate. There are some parts, for example, of the Midwest that have a much larger square footage to work with and have much more ability to do open air school solutions or other creative solutions that they can go to, like what they're calling like an ABCD system, where students are in groups and there are students that are 10 feet apart. There can be solutions like that. There are other jurisdictions that have already said that they're going to a virtual-only environment. This is where local decisions matter. These are local policy issues that have to be addressed by what is known by the public health authority in that jurisdiction and can be solved locally. And so this is to the point that you always make, why local elections matter as well. But these are decisions that are going to be made on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. And I think that's the appropriate level for this decision because there are different conditions. What we know, for example, about what's happening in Florida, yesterday in New York, showed that they got to zero, with 0 deaths yesterday for the first time, and that is significant. But also, if you look at Florida, they're in a very different position. So I could imagine that what New York City does, reopening one of the largest school systems in a few months, and what Florida would do are going to be different, and they should be.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's going to vary. It's going to be different according to, it's like we've always been saying, like even, the extent of the damage that COVID-19 wreaks on places or on communities. It all depends on the zip code you're in. It all depends on the kind of city you live in, the kind of state you live in, the kind of decisions that they're going to make. And you've always been very consistent in that statement. I think it's essential to keep reminding folks these are decisions that are made on the local level, in some instances the state level. It's not the Fed. So really at the end of the day, it's a lot of hyperbole and bluster coming from at the very top, the federal government, when it comes to some of these discussions or some of these edicts or so-called. What do you think? How do you envision, Nicolette, the partnership or the collaboration being like between those school districts on the local level, like a Philadelphia school district? And so, I've had, as I've been talking to listeners, people have been calling in and checking in with people, for example, here on this program. They wonder about, okay, well, what's the role that parents could play? Like, what sort of partnership should there be between the parents, the teachers, and the school districts in a moment like this, if it starts getting pushed to whether reopening or somewhat reopening a school or doing a hybrid approach, like a lot of online but a little bit of in-class session too? Like, is there sort of like a playbook that is being worked on or discussed as far as like what that collaboration looks like?
I've seen a playbook between, education departments, superintendents, teachers, public health departments, local leaders, and I think that's the right level. I've seen some parents, and again, this is not really my lane, so I can speak to what I've seen anecdotally. I've seen some parent groups really organized to think about what it looks like to support parents, especially those who may have to go back to work and may have to do like a partial solution as it relates to sending kids to school maybe once a week or having a safe virtual learning environment. But I think, again, these are things that are being figured out now. And so we should be approaching this from the vantage point of learning what the science is telling us today, understanding what we know about COVID and pediatric cases, understanding what we know about school systems across the country, and finding a solution that works. I think a lot of this is really still formulating at this point, because if you think about it, schools really kind of just got out really about a month ago. But also we're learning more about where we are in the pandemic today. And I think if you asked us 2 months ago if we would be at the point where we are still approaching the peak today, we would have said no. So I think the assumption a couple of months ago that we would have been able to really bend this curve has proven false. And so we're working within that, current set of conditions to figure out what it does look like to support parents, but also to have parent feedback, to think about what is feasible. I know there are a lot of conversations even going around high school sports right now. And it's all of those things that are being decided based on where we are right now, which is kind of not, if we're being honest, it's not where we expected that we would be. So it's still very new, and we're trying to use the science to guide us. And I think I've been heartened to see that a lot of local elected officials, superintendents, public health departments are using that science to guide their decisions as well.
Yeah. And then, as far as that leads to my next question. I wanted to start off at the top with a question about, like, what's it look like, in terms of that partnership between parents and teachers and school districts. But then, like, but the second part, you kind of touched on that just a little bit just now, a few moments ago. What's that partnership got to look like between public health practitioners, public health departments, and school districts? Like, how much do school districts need to rely on them and trust in them to get them through this?
how much do school districts need to rely on public health to get
Right. The public health, like what's that level of partnership and collaboration got to look like? Because you were saying, you've seen those playbooks. What are the fundamentals of that? What does that look like?
I mean, that's going to be a critical component, right? Because all of what we should be doing at this point should be driven by public health. And if we're thinking again about the conversation we've been having all year, public health departments are underfunded and under-resourced for the type of support that they need to provide right now. And so, yes, all of this needs to be in lockstep with public health. And you are going to have public health commissioners and departments across the country determining everything from, school reopening, which is a piece of it, all the way to the broader question of thinking through from what we know, what happens if there is a case? What do they want to do as it pertains to contact tracing? How do they want to work with parents, to think about things like out-of-state travel? There are a lot of components of this that do require it to be driven by that public health department. So they are very much in lockstep from everything I've seen. And I think it's important that they remain in lockstep because that's going to be where we need them most.
Yeah. Also, I have a question for you, Nicolette, from a listener on our Facebook live stream. Looks like two questions. Is Junior Lee. First, COVID is airborne, so if you clean up and disinfect today, a person can enter tomorrow and contaminate a space. So how is that safe? And then the last question is, Charles, can you ask the doctor, is the reason we don't see many COVID cases in kids is because they have not been as exposed as adults, or how we are seeing young adults uptick now?
So I'll take the second one first because we do need to talk about that airborne transmission.
Yeah.
So it's a couple of things. One is we're still at a point where less than 5% of Americans have been tested for COVID. So there's a difference between presenting symptoms and being infected. And what we know is that kids have gotten infected. We know that we've also seen kids die from COVID. So pediatric concerns with COVID have continued to persist. But we also know that for a lot of kids that have been infected with COVID, fortunately, it's been mild. That is not to say that every case has been mild. In New York City, which I think published a couple of papers about this, there was a condition that has been flagged in peds, in pediatric cases that were infected with COVID and ended up having some type of previously undescribed inflammatory distress syndrome. And you'll see that in April and May, there were a number of reports of kids that were previously infected with COVID and died of that inflammatory distress syndrome. And we're still trying to understand more about that. So I think it's a couple of things. One is there may be asymptomatic cases that have not yet been, that weren't diagnosed and understood. Two, we do tend to protect our kids more, and with schools closing early, if you remember early in March and April, schools were closing early. So, fortunately, I think a lot of kids were kept indoors. They're not running to the supermarket and things of that nature. And then, kids are more than little adults from a physiological perspective. So from a medical side, we have not yet fully studied enough about COVID and pediatrics to really understand what the pediatric immune system and physiology of a child, how that interacts with this particular virus. And so there could be a lot of different reasons, but one of them could very well be exposure. But when we have seen kids get exposed to COVID, especially those who have had symptoms, we have seen some very concerning trends there. So that's one. On the piece about COVID, so I want to make sure, and I'm sure you've been talking about this as well, but the piece about airborne versus droplet, those are two sides of a similar coin. It means something very different scientifically. It means that small droplets can contain COVID and disseminate further. So that's really what, when we think about airborne, it's not just that the virus is living in dry air, it's that droplet spread and micro droplet spread of the virus is disseminating the virus. But it is also true that for any virus, if you're concerned about what's called viral shedding, somebody speaking or singing and releasing droplets into the air, that you're going to have to clean that space as long as there's a person that walks in. So that sanitizing plan, that disinfection plan, what it looks like to clean these schools repeatedly, once a day not being enough, twice a day probably not being enough either, thinking about what it looks like to do that is going to be a really critical part of it, because to that person's point and their question, as soon as anyone walks in a space.
So, Nicolette, real quick on that, right? Like, well, then is an ideal situation, or one ideal situation is, because, right, like, how long is a COVID particle on a surface? Isn't it like for what's like the period where it finally disappears? Is it like 48 hours or 72 hours? Like if a COVID particle falls on a surface like a desk, it'll go away in like a few days, correct?
It won't go away in about 48 hours, depending on the amount of particles, the amount of fluid, and all of that stuff. It will be deactivated, so it can no longer infect someone.
Got it. So maybe the ideal situation here is, I mean, like, it is a blended approach. It's like, okay, the kids going to school for a day, like on Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, don't go to school, go back Thursday, and then you got the whole weekend for, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you still have like that disinfecting program going on, but yeah, it's just, these public schools hardly have enough resources to clean schools once a day, right? So to have them doing it 2-3 times a day, it's just not realistic. Maybe that's just the way to go about it if we're keeping that science in mind.
Right, and I think this is where you have to consider that there are multiple variables at play. So that is one possible solution, but you also need to consider the fact that people are moving in and out of that space, how frequently people are in that space, how much they are moving around. All of those things are going to impact the frequency of that cleaning, right? So it's not enough to just say maybe one, just rotating people. It's also going to be some other things, like how often those people are there, how close they are together, whether or not they have facial coverings, and all of those pieces are going to complicate the process as well. So there are many different variables, and that's why we need to keep these conversations going, because it's not just a simple A or B solution. We have to think about the entire part of the system and determine what's feasible based off of what we know we can do and what the science is telling us we need to do as well.
Yeah. We've been talking with Nicolette Lewis-Saint, who is Executive Director of Healthcare Ready. Go to healthcareready.org, and they've been our partners here at Reality Check, providing us with some public health best practice and public health conversation, some essential public health conversation as we've been going through pandemic. And Dr. Lewis-Saint's been giving us that expertise each week, each Monday here on Reality Check. Go to @Dr. N. Lewis-Saint. But once again, healthcareready.org for more there. Nicolette, thanks for your time. Always. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and stay safe.
All right, you too. Stay healthy. All right, let's just take a break. And when we come back, we'll just go ahead and just open up the phone lines. 215-634-8065. Toll free, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
Times are changing, and you deserve a system designed to grow your business. Meet Jaxcom, the new standard in business class voice. Only Jaxcom gives you the most features per dollar. Things like visual voicemail, call monitoring, advanced call queues, virtual assistant, plus a lot more. The stuff the other guys charge you extra for or don't have. Jaxcom proudly supports Black-owned businesses. Reference WORD for 20% off any plan. Jaxcom. Visit us online at jaxcom.net. That's JAXCOM.net.
Be heard. Want another way to join the conversation? Follow us on social media using the hashtag onWURD. Be heard. Stay connected to Word Radio. Independent Black media.
Part-time job, full-time hustle, all-time Shiro to all of us. You nurture, we listen. You teach, we thrive. You lift our spirits, but we've got to lay down the truth. It's time for you, our Shiro, to stretch for the stars. Start saving more for retirement now so you can feel prepared and live your life to the fullest. Get free tips to help boost your retirement savings now at aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
A message brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WordRadio.com, Word TV, Word app, 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check, 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Phone lines are open, so appreciate folks also chiming in on our Facebook live stream. Junior Lee, thanks once again for your thoughts and your questions for Dr. Lewis Saint. Junior Lee also saying the two-option virtual and in-person are the best way right now. Let the parents choose which one works best for them. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, I don't. I mean there's your school choice. So, like just, you know, like give them an option of that. But just as I was thinking about it, like, right, that's when you. A COVID-19 or coronavirus particle deactivates, as Dr. Lewis Saint said, after 48 hours. So, I mean, we can do kind of a staggered approach thing here. You can have the kids going in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Don't go to, you know, do online, right? And meanwhile, Tuesday, Wednesday is done. That's when you clean schools, you know. So you also let any part, because you can't just expect that they're going to clean up every coronavirus particle that's in it. They're going to miss some spots, and that's not going to be like 100% sure. So you know, give it the 48-hour period, and then like the Tuesday to Wednesday, and then Thursday the kids go back to school. You know, like, you know, you get some. I mean, if this is going to happen, right? You know, but then the key is, like, you know, Dr. Lewis Saint was saying. Well, real quick, let me finish that thought. The kids go back to school on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's a one big clean, and there's also now you got 72 hours where like the coronavirus particles deactivate, and then, you know, Monday the whole cycle starts over again, and so it's probably the way you're going to spread it out. But obviously the challenges are, one, you know, you have to really discipline things, and you really have to come up with a plan to guard those spaces against people walking in and out of them, including teachers and administrators, during the days that the kids are off, right? So that has to happen. And you know, two, like, okay, the activity and the behavior of the students when they're in the schools, you know, making sure. I did hear like one guideline being, you know, students under 10 wouldn't be required to wear a mask because they're probably not going to keep the mask on anyway. But then a lot of teenagers and young adults have been having that issue, keeping their mask on or keeping the mask on properly. So then, you know, you have to worry about that. And then, you know, high levels of infection, and then, you know, taking infection back to homes. It's a lot to worry about. Let me go to George out of Center City, who's calling in for a reality check. George.
Fine. How you doing, Charles?
Hey, what's happening?
This whole thing about going back to school and all that, people should know that's just another one of Trump's just mumble-jumble moments, and we, like, run with it. Like, you know, it's going to really happen. You don't control the schools. You know, all this defunding, ain't none of that's going to happen. He's just throwing things out there and people going for it. You can't even take care of the regular school year. So how all of a sudden they're going to do all this disinfect? First of all, you don't have the bathrooms don't work. The water don't work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you gotta, and that's why they had to close the schools. I mean, bees as though they're working around the clock to get all the asbestos out of the schools.
Yeah.
You know, but like they say, now they're getting them out when the kids ain't even gonna go back. They're cleaning every last one of these schools, and bet you dollars to donuts they're gonna sell those schools for pennies on a dollar. They got all their asbestos out now. You know. They're like at a halfway point with them because they're working around the clock to get it done, you know. But like I'm saying, Charles, is that they can't keep just sanitary things in school during regular hours. I mean, so how is they going to all of a sudden have to disinfect and do this and do that? You don't even, as dumb as Height is, you don't even hear Height talking like that.
Yeah.
You know, one other thing I like to bring to your attention, Charles, you know this whole thing about defunding the police? We were talking about that in Philadelphia first. You know, you just listen to the idiots who was talking it. Is that's the whole Trump thing. Trump started that. His people, George Soros, I think I'm saying his name right, the one that supports
George Soros, yeah.
Yeah, George Soros is the one who paid for the riots, and like, if you get crashed on, crash test people trace everything from when the police like took the ID, over 200 and something people. Each person that they stopped that looked suspicious weren't from here. Then they trace it back to where all the bricks and stuff was bought from people out of town and wanted them to place them in places like the middle of Broad Street, different places where bricks could be thrown. Everybody who they got facial recognition through is not even from here. So that tells you something right there. Defund the police, right? That's a big move that they're making so that people get caught up there to get Trump reelected. That's what it is. You keep talking that foolishness. Oh, we want to defund the police. We want fun. It's all crazy people talking and people who can't think. They got to hear somebody else say something.
Well, the other thing I want to be real abundantly clear about on this, George. I mean, as far as George Soros and his involvement in Black Lives Matter and the protests, I mean, all those theories have been debunked. You do know that, right? I mean, the fact checkers have gone copiously through that, and there's no evidence suggesting that George Soros paid for protests. There's just no evidence of that. And I mean, and there's no evidence that George Soros was a former Nazi. I know that people have been throwing that out there. He's a former Hungarian Jew. I mean, I don't know of any Jews that were formerly members of the Nazi Party. So we had to be real careful of that. Oh, George, I gotta let George go because I gotta bring on Lola out of Jenkintown, who's calling in for a reality check. Lola.
Oh, it's got a great show. I just wanted to say, why can't the school district of Philadelphia get it together? Born and raised there, and I just don't understand. Okay, so up here and most, not just here in the suburbs, and as you know, like you said, I've heard you say millions of times, you went to school up here, and they have been sending out letters. They have been in touch with the parents since this COVID thing have taken place. I'm talking about, the school districts up here, all over. I'm talking about everywhere. I have friends and family, all, just everywhere. They have been keeping in touch with the parents on a daily basis. They have been reaching out to the parents about the kids who don't have computers, because just because you live in the suburbs doesn't mean that you're rich. So I want to say that. And so a lot of people don't have computers or whatever they don't have. They have been reaching out to the parents about that, about speaking to the child on the phone, about giving the computers to the parents, leaving them on the doors, waiting for you outside, doing all kinds of things. The school district, whenever it comes down to African-American children, there is always a problem. Why? You have the names and numbers of all the children who are registered, okay? Let's just say that. I'm not talking about kids who might be homeless or whatever, but we still need to reach out to them, too, because there are a lot of kids who are homeless who go to schools, right? So then you have all of these kids. You have the where they live. You have their names and numbers, the guardian, yada, yada, yada. All this time that we've been out of school, the kids have been out of school and we have been at home working or whatever, they could be in touch with the parents, making sure that everything is okay, keeping in contact. Charles, the kids cannot go back to school in September. You know why? Because it's not safe for them. It's not safe.
Yeah.
And listen, I want them to go back.
It's not safe for the
kids to.
It's not safe for the families too that they return to, the households they return to.
Exactly, because think about it. A lot of grandparents. My grandmother helped with my two kids. Now imagine them going to school and then bringing something back to her and then killing her. What about the ramifications it has for the kids?
What's going to have to happen is, and see, that's where we see the disparity. That all comes into clear view, right? Well, the disparities between the school districts in terms of resources, in terms of like the way the districts treat the parents, the way the parents are like have the resources and the time, and the kind of capacity to get involved, to have very active and well-resourced PTAs in a place like Montgomery County versus a place like Philly. And really, at the end of the day, the best solution to all of this is keep your kids at home. Come up with a remote learning program. And I mean, I don't know why people, when I say this, I'm not saying this in a disparaging way. I'm not saying this to like grind an axe against any particular company or anything like that. It's just common sense. People should I'm like just flabbergasted, but I have heard from a lot of people, it's starting to catch fire. people need to demand, especially in a city like Philadelphia, free universal broadband for all K through 12
So
students.
you just took it out of my mouth. And also,
I don't understand. I mean, you've got the largest broadband company in the nation is headquartered in Philadelphia. I'm not asking for free broadband for everyone. It'd be nice, but that's not what I'm asking for. Just for K through 12 students. I mean, so that should be a utility. That should be basic infrastructure. It just flabbergasts me that city officials, that city elected officials, that the mayor, city council, that parents, there hasn't been a mass movement for that because people don't want their kids to go to school. Okay, well, if your kids don't go to school, everybody's going to have to do distance or remote learning. It can be done. It can be done. I'm telling you this as someone who like my 15-year-old now did it for 1 year. And it can work, but we were in a position obviously where I was able to do that with her, but it can work. It can work. It works well. Like if you're disciplined about it and you put a plan in place, the school district could do it, but the only way for the kids to access that is if you have a broadband action plan in place. And that just has not happened for the school district of Philadelphia yet in a way that's called I'm not talking about internet essentials. Free universal broadband for all K through 12 students. Like, it's that simple. And it's not, I don't think that's an activist thing to say. It's just pure common sense. And I'm like, we'll talk about it more tomorrow, but it's like, the FCC's got to step in on this, or just locally, something's got to give on that. If people are worried about their safety and not having their kids going back to school and getting households infected or getting the kids infected, so on and so forth. Lola, I got to let you go, and I got to step off my soapbox here because I got to wrap this Monday edition of Reality Check. We'll be back at it tomorrow. We're heading into The Source with rapping Professor Dr. Aaron Smith. That's up next here on WURD. So keep your radio dial locked in. Thanks, everyone, for calling in, for listening in, as well for the questions and comments on places like Facebook Live. Really appreciate that, and on Twitter as well, too. Thank you for that. I want to thank Troy Wilmore, too, at the Board of Steel. He's getting it done. Thank you. And continue to go to @Ellison Report, #RealityCheck on Twitter.com. All right, we're headed into The Source with rapping Professor Dr. Aaron Smith on WURD. In the meantime, Philly, please stay sharp, stay smart, and more importantly, please stay safe out there. Stay safe out there. We will talk to you tomorrow, Tuesday edition of Reality Check. We'll see you then.